Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптя посорбати довбані щі, та трохи в ущах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Зі сходу припхались до нас барани, для восстановлення великої страни, найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи, всяке озброєння, різне, ракети, потужні машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, і ми зачаїли на орків образу, з бандитів російських робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, на вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто ж винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає їх цар.
Hello, everyone. I am the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be with you once again.
And today we're here to report the day 99 news of the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. Unbelievably, we are only another 24 hours away from day 100, and it's honestly amazing and incredible to believe that the Ukrainians have held on and defended their nation so well that we are literally looking at this war entering the 3 digits in terms of how long this war has gone on in terms of days. It's something very impressive to me, and I think as well as everyone else here on the live stream right now, it's got to be impressive to y'all as well, because honestly, I didn't think that Ukraine this war would ever go on this long. I thought someone would have won at this point. Of course, the Russians are very stubborn and they're not giving up yet. But the Ukrainians as well are getting large amounts of support from the West and also have a lot of morale on their own side, and they are continuing on this struggle at a pace that is unbelievable. Before we actually move on to the schedule for tonight, I once again want to make sure that everyone knows that we are running a limited edition merchandise run right now. The Lee Spring Army wants you. That's right, new viewers in the live chat right now. We want you, each and every one of you. And if all of y'all do enjoy this channel a lot and would like to support it and help us out, make sure that this can keep on running, of course there are super chats, but you can also get a t-shirt if you would like and go over to the merchandise store and check out this limited edition run. It is a pretty cool shirt, not gonna lie. We always try and do our best with the designs to make sure they're classy, so make sure to go get one. It does help out our channel a great deal. So with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Matthew real quick if he would like to give a few words about the merch, since he actually is the designer about it. And if you don't have any words to say, Matthew, we'll move right on into the schedule.
So, yeah, I'll say real quick that we're trying out several new designs here recently on our limited edition runs. And I have been taking down everybody's suggestions that they've been putting in over the many nights of streaming. So feel free to let me know if there's any more suggestions you have, and we'll definitely take it into consideration on our future runs.
Also, one other thing that I would like to mention is that for some reason I actually just forgot what it was, and so we're not going to cover that topic because it just passed right out of my head, and we're now going to talk about why this title for the video is the way it is tonight. Some people believe they're clickbaity. To those people, I say they need to just, like hold on to their socks, because I don't try and clickbait. The titles, of course, are capitalized to catch people's attention, but the titles do have a very high level of truth to them every single night, and we have seen that much like the French mutinies of 1917 on the Western Front, World War I, the Russians are now starting to endure this as well in the area of Kherson, where we can see that Russian soldiers, apparently from the DPR and LPR, as well as maybe even Russian regulars, although we don't have any proof to confirm that yet, may be mutinying down there in the Kherson area. That will actually be the first bit of news we cover for the night. And so with that, let's get straight into the schedule. We're actually going to be moving directly into the Kherson area first thing tonight and covering the bit of news that we've gotten from there. While we don't actually have any video evidence or news about how the ongoing Ukrainian counterattack is going in this area, we do have news about the, I guess you could say, status of the Russian units in that area, of course, mutinying, and so that's very important to cover because that may be showing critical lacks of supplies and morale in that particular area. We're then going to move on further up the front, and we're now going to go straight into the location unknowns later on in the stream after we cover the Kherson news. The Kherson news and the location unknowns will be covered in one single segment. Then we'll be moving on to the Kharkiv area. We'll actually take a pause right here to answer 3 questions from the chat. Once we answer those 3 questions, we will then cover the Kharkiv news and also the northern Donbass news. We'll actually be covering this little bit of news near Orlivka as well. After that, we will then start moving back down towards Mariupol and the rest of the southern front, and also the large amount of international news we've gotten today across Eastern Europe. But before we do that, we will, of course, answer another 3 questions from the chat, and once we do that, we'll then round out the rest of the news for tonight, go to the... I forgot, I just remembered. Unfortunately, no one did a speech-to-text translation of the speech from President Zelensky tonight, and so I actually did not include that in tonight's news. I will be looking for one, it's just that it never came out when I was, like, scrounging around for the news, and so I will try and add that tomorrow, but as of right now, this is one of the first nights we don't actually have the speech from Zelensky, so I'm sorry to a lot of people who do enjoy those, but sadly I don't have it. So once we cover all of the international news, we will then return back to Kyiv and we'll round out the stream there. You know, of course, tell everyone that the news segment is over, and then we'll move on into the question segment for the rest of the night. And so, without further ado, let's get right into this news. We have massive news today in the Kherson area. And while I didn't really believe when the Ukrainian forces were mutinying, because whenever we saw those videos, there were no armbands on any of the soldiers. On top of that, a lot of people pointed out that they actually had very Russified accents. And so a lot of people were pointing out those discrepancies. And also, when talking to units from that area, every single one of them reported that they had never heard of that. They are well supplied and they're doing very well. And while those reports can be a little discredited because it is the Ukrainian army and they're not going to let reports out saying that their soldiers are mutinying, it was very skeptical to say the least. But today in the Kherson area, we've gotten a video that looks to be largely true based off of the condition of these soldiers and how we've seen them before. And so we're going to show this video first, where we can see that the Donetsk People's Republic's 113th Regiment appears to be mutinying and refusing to fight any longer. Here's the reason why I'm saying this video seems more realistic. One, these soldiers are dressed in rags. Some of them look like they don't even have an actual uniform, and their camo is extremely mismatched. This is a hallmark sign that this is certainly a DNR force, because it's actually, I would actually think it'd be kind of hard for Ukraine to get all of the camo patterns that are visible in this one shot here. And also we can see that every single one of them has some kind of white armband on them, which is always absent whenever we see a Ukrainian video of Ukrainian soldiers refusing to fight, is that they never have any armbands on of any kind, which is always very questionable to me, considering that all of the armed forces of both countries are always wearing armbands. And so with that, here's the video, and I'm going to summarize it because it is 6 minutes long, so we're not going to watch the whole thing because it's just this guy giving a speech and showing the unit. But here is this unit declaring that they will refuse to fight and therefore mutinying.
Уважаемый Путин Владимир Владимирович, к вам обращается личный состав 1-й роты 5-го стрелкового батальона 113-го стрелкового полка мобилизационного резерва Донецкой Народной Республики. Мы обращаемся к офицерскому корпусу России.
Also, I want to pause this real quick and answer this question that I just saw in the live chat. Lil Cheese 721 said, "Is that guy in overalls?" And I think you're talking about this guy. And the answer is no. He's wearing pants and a wife beater. And you know, that's something that is kind of a funny name to me, is that shirt's called a wife beater. But I don't know how it got that name. I guess people who wear that shirt beat their wives. I don't really know. But no, it's not overalls. Just wanted to answer that one real quick because I was thinking that too when I first saw this video when I was getting the news. Also, is this guy wearing sneakers?
1989 года отстоял веренных ему подчиненных. Как и тогда, мы не можем добиться ответов на наши законные требования. О той ситуации вы выразились как о болезни государства, называемой параличем власти. Теперь же безразличие государственного аппарата снова вынуждает людей отстаивать свои права. Теперь уже от перегибов на местах.
So we're now going to skip forward a little bit because this man is literally reading off the Emancipation Proclamation at this point in terms of length. And unfortunately, we don't have a speech-to-text translation for it. So you can see that 2 minutes later, he's still listing off why they're refusing to fight. And also another thing that is a hallmark thing that lets us know that these are definitely DNR forces, that you can see those Soviet belts. This guy also, the Mr. Overalls, has one of these old Soviet belts as well. And that is something that you know and can identify DPR and LPR troops with, is if they're wearing that belt. That is almost like their go-to only thing that's like a dress uniform part of most of their uniforms. Although a lot of them are lacking that here in this video.
Товарищи офицеры, наши средства массовой информации критикуют противника ввиду его циничного отношения к жизням солдат из рядов территориальной обороны.
We're now going to skip forward a little bit more.
Гипертония, повышенное давление, и болен я гепатитом С, цирроз печени.
Я Болотов Роман Александрович. У меня зрение -5. Я ничего не вижу. Также на протяжении 1,5 недели у меня очень сильный кашель, боли в грудной клетке и нету аппетита. Что возможно...
So now we can see that they're going through the unit almost person by person, it seems, in the video now, and they're actually getting the personal statements from each and every one of them that they're refusing to fight. And so that means that that commander isn't talking on behalf of the unit. The entire unit wills it to be that they refuse to fight. This is literally a unit that is mutinying. Every single one of them is nearly refusing to fight. And if you were to put this into a similar scope in Russian military history, I would say that this would be very similar to the mutiny on the Potemkin. You know, because of course that happened around the Russian Civil War, actually right in the Black Sea, right near Ukraine, which is a very interesting story. I highly suggest y'all look into that one, because that one was just wild, very interesting. The Russian Navy is one of the most jacked up navies in military history, and so I just highly suggest y'all look into the Russian naval history in general, not because it's a competent navy, but because it's an incredibly incompetent navy throughout all of its history. But now we can see each soldier declaring that they will no longer fight.
Я Лошенко Андрей Игоревич, 2003 года. У меня отец инвалид 2-й группы. За ним требуется уход.
Also, I'd have to give this man credit here. He actually has some pretty good trigger discipline. He doesn't have his finger on the trigger, which I've seen a couple of times in videos like these, and that's always scary because they always have it aimed almost right down to their feet or someone else's feet, and so I'm always scared that they're just going to have a quick little jump, pull the trigger, and shoot someone in the foot. So, while I'm not a big fan of pro-Russian forces, it's good to see that this guy at least has some proper trigger discipline.
Я Черенков Александр Владимирович. У меня дома находится гражданская жена и 4 детей. На момент мобилизации она была беременна. Когда родила, то оказалось, ребенок нездоров.
Я Бакулков Андрей Владимирович. Во время мобилизации прогрессировала болезнь тромбофлебит, тромбы правой ноги. Находясь здесь, болезнь ухудшилась.
And it appears that he's showing us some kind of wound. I'm not really sure if it is from a bullet or shrapnel. It's actually really hard to see. So unfortunately, I can't say what that wound was. I'm sure he just described it. So if we have any Ukrainian or Russian speakers in the chat, please inform us all as to what that man just said. I would like to know. But with that, we're going to let the video continue and skip forward a little bit past this man. And on to Mr. Overalls. We've gotten to Mr. Overalls.
У меня тромбофлебит агрессирует на ноге.
We can now see him taking off his sneakers as well to show how bad off his feet are.
Полянский Константин Георгиевич, 1968 года рождения. Оборван бицепс правой руки. Паховая грыжа. Наполовину слепой, одним ухом не слышу.
Я Земляных Николай Николаевич. У меня сын инвалид детства. Я опекун.
So I just checked with the chat, and apparently what was shown off on that guy's leg was a snake bite. And so I don't know what the additional context of that was, but apparently he's refusing to fight because he got bit by a snake. I could kind of understand that, but at the same time, in a war, you know, that seems like a minor injury, but still, apparently he's refusing to fight because he got bit by a snake. I'm not going to sit here and discredit the guy, because refusing to fight for the Russians is a very good thing, and I think this should be highly encouraged amongst all units, regardless of what their reasons are, but we can clearly see that they are mutinying, and they've made it clear at this point that they will no longer fight.
Интерпретируют требования решения данных проблемных вопросов как саботаж. С уважением к офицерам, что остались в солдатских крови.
With that, that is the end of the video. What I was actually just thinking about that guy who got bit on the leg by a snake. Apparently he got bit on the leg by a Russian officer, because I think only Russian officers have fangs, if I'm very certain on that. Or maybe Vladimir Putin himself came down there and tried to feast on him and mistook him for a Ukrainian soldier. I'm not exactly sure, but still, it's great to see that the Russian forces are mutinying in the area, and we can tell by the clothes that they're wearing, and also the condition of their weapons, seeing that they have a wide variety of AKs that appear to have been made at different times, with different magazines. One could safely assume that this unit is in very poor shape, even before they began to mutiny, and I'm sure afterwards there's going to be major crackdowns in their unit. The Russians will probably be sending in military police, or the DPR will be sending in military police to try and arrest the mutineers, or force them back into the fight. I'm not really sure how that will unfold, but it is interesting to see this. And with that, we're now going to move on to the second bit of news we've gotten from the KHerson area, where we've seen the Russians apparently get a tiny bit of success. They managed to capture a mortar, and it appeared to be an SPG as well from the Ukrainians, but the losses were minimal. We're now going to skip forward past this intro. Here we can see one of the Ukrainian mortars.
Вообще с кайфом. Так, ну, быстренько выскочил. Там типы с него могут выскочить, пацаны.
You now see them still moving through the brush, and we can see a smoking SPG. No, I'm sorry, correction, that looks more like a T-64 BV.
Готов, сучонок. Слава России, мужики, слава России.
Very interesting to see, and also very important to note that while we have seen a few Ukrainian losses in this instance, of course the Ukrainians have admitted that they are taking losses right now, somewhere around 60 to 100 Ukrainian soldiers killed per day at the moment across all front lines, but still, nothing to panic about all too much, because losing one mortar and then a T-64 isn't exactly war changing, at least in the terms of the direction of which side is going to be favored. One tank being lost, considering that the Ukrainians have more tanks in the theaters than the Russians, is literally a drop in the bucket. So with that, interesting to see that the Russians apparently got a small amount of success today on film, but nothing too major, considering that the counterattack is still ongoing, and it does look like the Ukrainians are still making progress as of yesterday, but unfortunately, as of today, we don't have any updates from either side as to how it's actually going on the actual front lines. So with that, we're now going to move out of the KHerson area, and we're now going to move up to the location unknowns. A lot of people love the location unknowns, and I can understand why. They're just very interesting tidbits of video. I just honestly wish I could find the locations as to where these happened, because I like to be able to show how the front line is developing, and if we could actually get these put down in a specific spot, that would help us out a lot. And so if anyone on Reddit is watching, I would like to make the special note, if you ever find a video and you're uploading it, or if you're in Ukraine and you're watching the stream and you're ever making one of these videos and uploading it, please try and include the location of where this occurred or an area around where this occurred, because it will be very beneficial for me and a whole bunch of YouTubers who try and report this news to know exactly where these videos occurred, which can help a better picture of the front line be made, and also it may help the Ukrainian government as well. For example, if you film a convoy moving past you and you film it and you say it was in Volodymyrivka, that would give them a pretty good idea of where the convoys may be moving through. So once again, just a PSA, it's sorry about the PSA, but please try and include locations if you ever post anything, because it always helps us out a lot. Of course, if it's Ukrainian forces, never include a location, but if it's Russian forces, always try to include the location of where they're at. So with that, we're now on to the location unknown news. Starting off on our first bit, we can see that it's time for a smoke break. In the weirdest of places, they're flying a helicopter, and this man decides it's the perfect time for a vape. As we see, they're flying incredibly low over the countryside, and now the cameraman turns the camera around and he takes a hit from his vape. Of course, probably trying to take the edge off. Can't really complain all too much. I just thought it's an interesting and somewhat funny little video to see. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians push the Russians back in a firefight. This is a little bit of a lengthy bit of footage. I actually got the extended version that was not shown in today's summary video in the middle of the day. And so here is some helmet cam footage of a Ukrainian soldier fighting the Russians in some shrubbery. And so, without further ado, let's get right into it. First, when you hear the fire being exchanged in between the Ukrainians and the Russians, when you see the Ukrainians firing into the brush, but we can't exactly see what they're shooting at, and I'm not sure if the Ukrainians can see it either. They may just be trying to lay down some fire. We can now see the soldiers advancing to the next line of shrubs. We can now see that the soldier is most likely reloading. He certainly is. We can hear him rack the gun to load another bullet. We can also see, and this is something important to note, sorry to break the flow of the firefight here, but we can see that every single soldier in this unit has an AK with a suppressor on it, and also an actual nice optic. We can also see another one over here, and that lets us know that this Ukrainian unit is apparently very well armed, and very well supplied as well. We can see that they all have pretty decent helmets. They are kind of that paratrooper helmet, but of course, they filled in the sides with more ballistic material, or a headset. I can't really tell if anyone is wearing a headset for certain, but we can see that these Ukrainian soldiers are much better equipped than most of the Russian forces that we've seen, and also pretty better equipped than some of the Ukrainian forces we see by and large across most of the front line. And so I don't know if this is considered one of Ukraine's more elite forces, but based off of their strategy here, we can kind of tell that they are. They're using the standard strategy of laying down suppressive fire and then advancing about half or a third of the squad forward. That I guess you could say unit, that part of the squad, then stops. It starts laying down suppressive fire, and the other group that was laying down suppressive fire then gets up and moves even further than this group here. And so it looks like they're working off of a standard strategy to, of course, assault a position. And it does show that they have a decent level of training, considering that, as we see the video go on, they do pretty well. So I'm going to let the video continue. We can now see them advancing again after the other group got in position, and now we can hear them laying down suppressing fire. We can now see them laying down the fire since they've moved into their next position. And we can now hear the fire stop from the other unit, which lets us know that they are now moving forward as well. Now we can hear a Russian Mi-24 flying over their position in an attempt to give support to the Russian units that are most likely being assaulted. But it appears that the Mi-24 did a pass and did not fire. It may have been doing a pass to see what the situation is like on the ground and to assess what's going on. It may come in for a pass hereafter, but I haven't seen beyond this part of the video. So we're now going to continue. It appears, according to the captions, that the Ukrainian soldiers saw the helicopter and have decided, so that way they don't get blasted by like a 30mm autocannon from an Mi-24P or anything like that. It appears that they may have decided to withdraw, so that way they didn't, of course, get smacked by the helicopter. I'm not really sure about that. We can't exactly tell, but we did see them backtracking a little bit, it seems, in this film.
Отходьте, хто ззаді.
We can now see the soldier posting up in some kind of underbrush. We can now see him laying down even more fire. We can kind of see the top of the scope is smacking into his helmet, but in a firefight, I'm sure that doesn't matter at all. You can hear that the firefight continues. I'm not exactly sure if they are withdrawing. If they are, it may be a slow withdrawal due to them being under fire. But right now, it actually seems like they've turned around and begun to re-engage the enemy. And we haven't heard of the Mi-24 since we saw it fly over in the video. Now we can see him crawling forward towards the fire, and so I'm assuming that they are probably not retreating as we continue to see them advance. And I would have to say here that this is definitely evidence of their advance. We can see what may be some kind of earthworks right here, which may be a trench. that is certainly a trench. And so they never actually retreated like the video said. They advanced the entire time, and at the very end of the video, we saw them firing into the trench itself. So very interesting to see. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the ending of the video, whether they assaulted the trench directly or not, but it was great to see that the Ukrainian forces continued to push on even after an attack helicopter flew over them, which in usual situations, if you don't have any kind of air defense to take down a helicopter, that's not a good thing. But it's still, their morale did not waver, and they continued the advance all the way up until the very entrance of the Russian trench. So great to see, and it's always good to know that the Ukrainian forces on the ground, whenever we get to see the film, are very well put together, well trained, and they know what they're doing. They're very professional compared to the Russians. And when I say that they're very well put together, some people may be saying, of course, they have a lot of military experience here in the United States. That kind of stuff is learned in basic training. And you're absolutely correct. Of course, you have service, so you'd know more about that than me. But one thing I do have to say is that for the Ukrainians to have only been, I guess you could say, implementing Western doctrines for around 8 years at this point, this is a very good level of training, and it shows that the Ukrainian army is competent to have dropped the Eastern doctrine like the Russians and pro-Russian forces are using right now, and pick up the Western doctrine like the United States uses, and actually implement it in a viable way that seems to be working on the battlefield as far as we can tell. And so very interesting to see. We got a lot of information from that video, and of course, great to see the Ukrainians continue on the counterattacks. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a warrior making a garden. You've heard of warriors in a garden, but I'm sure none of you have ever heard of a warrior making a garden. And here we can see that Ukrainian soldiers take it upon themselves to create gardens wherever they be, which is very cool to me.
Так, ось у нас грядочка наша, да?
Это просто.
Да.
По цветочки. Вот хрен. Вот картошку садим, блядь.
Картошку, Сашко.
А там у нас лучок еще с чесночком.
Сашко, чуєш, а це раннє чи пізнє?
Без ГМО.
Без ГМО.
Там дальше вон пошли туда.
Да, там ще, а дальше
Вот
ж є.
там лучок есть.
Ще ж лучок тут є, йо-моє. А ну, Денчик. Денчик нам вообще.
And so we're going to pause the video right here for a second, and I just got to say, this is something that's really cool to me. So if y'all don't know, of course, I'm a huge World War I history buff, so that's kind of everything I know about. I live and breathe World War I history. The Germans in World War I were kind of in the mindset that I feel like the Russians will be entering very soon, and that's that as long as they stay within enemy territory in their minds, you know, of course, it's not enemy territory to us, it's Ukrainian land, but as long as they stay in enemy territory, they are in the good, and they're winning the war. And so the Germans would start to fortify their trenches incredibly well, and it got so good that at some points when the Americans would advance through these trenches at the later end of the war, they found out that they had beer gardens behind a hill, you know, near the trench where the Germans would hang out, and they had little wicker chairs and stuff like that. They would enjoy a beer and some sausage. They would have libraries built into the dugouts of the trenches with beautiful books. I remember hearing a story of one of these amazing books. It was literally gold. It had gold inlays on it, and it was just stomped into the mud. You know, an accident. It wasn't an intentional thing. It was accidental. But still, this is what I feel like the Ukrainians are turning into in modern context these days. They're literally planting gardens of some of their favorite vegetables just to have them. And I have to say, that's really cool to see. So I'm going to let the video continue.
Ой, солнце сейчас сбоку.
Вот с одной стороны. С
О.
чесночком.
И сейчас с другой стороны.
Ну, с другой стороны.
С другой.
Что это, блядь, произошло? А? Это
Вот так вот.
Ну как это зеленый херню будет готовить? Нет. Давай что, тушняка надо? Да. Это свининка.
That's the end of the video, but it was a really cool video to see that the Ukrainians have pretty decent morale. Of course, I say that every time we see them, and it's so obvious. They exude high morale levels. And we can also see that they're enjoying their time in the trenches the best they can, and they're even planting gardens and occupying their time with doing other things that they just enjoy to do. So it's great to see that they continue on to do those such things, and hopefully, with that kind of agricultural business that the Ukrainians are getting at, maybe they can fix the food shortage. Of course, I'm just playing. That's, of course, a serious issue that everyone's looking at right now and very concerned about, but still very cool to see that the Ukrainian soldiers are taking it upon themselves to maybe grow some of their own food if they have the time. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see some S-300s in action. These, of course, are Ukrainian S-300s, which are one of the normal, I guess you could say, Eastern European post-Soviet anti-air defense systems. These actually made a huge deal, I believe, if I remember correctly, when these anti-air systems were actually handed over to Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria. It was a massive ordeal because these anti-air defense systems are usually considered fairly competent, and that's a lot coming from something that was Soviet designed and produced. But anyways, here's the video. We can now see the S-300 missile on its way to its target. We don't know exactly what it's trying to shoot down, but now we can see inside of the S-300 system, and you can see that while it is a competent system, it is very dated looking on the inside. It looks like mostly 1980s, late 1970s kind of technology. A lot of weapon systems are like that. We can see a second missile get fired, and a third missile get fired in a different direction. And so I don't know how many air targets they're engaging, or if all of these missiles are being fired at this single target. But now we can see apparently some parts of a Russian aircraft marked with Z. This may be an Orlan drone or something very similar. And so it appears that they used the S-300 to shoot down some drones. We can see multiple parts of what this S-300 system may have shot down. It appears that it shot down multiple drones from these pictures. This appears to be some kind of a Caliber or Iskander cruise or ballistic missile. As we, of course, you can see this looks like the rear tail section of an Iskander missile, but I'm not exactly sure. And with that, that is the end of the video, but it's great to know that the Ukrainian air defenses are strong and they are continuously engaging the Russian Air Force over Ukrainian airspace. We know that by and large, the Ukrainian air defenses have pretty much won the Battle of Britain in a way, in the modern context. We'll call it the Battle of Ukraine, by shooting down so many Russian aircraft that the Russian Air Force has never actually been able to fly at its full operational capacity from what we know it can field, at least on paper. But in reality, they may be fielding as many aircraft as they can, and their logistics, like every other bit of their logistical force, is not up to the challenge of actually fielding large amounts of aircraft for the Russians. With that, it's great to see the Ukrainian air defenses are running, and we're on to the next video. Here we can see in this video a Ukrainian soldier showing off some gifts. He has a large amount of course, Western gear, a large amount of mortar shells that have been given by foreign countries, and he is going to give us a tour of these systems, much like he is showing off candy at a candy shop. So, here's the video. So he just said that these were made in Italy.
Польша, Полька. Ну и опять же таки, то, что 843Б, наша чешская. Да, ну чехи нам такое дали. У них взрывателя интересные, там пальцем переводится фугас осколок. Выглядит тут это очень хорошо, конечно.
We can now see him doing an unboxing video of one of the Italian mortar rounds. As we can see, he's very excited about it. Apparently, he's a huge fan of these systems. He's showing us what's inside of the package. I think he may give us a word from his sponsor very soon. We can now see him getting the mortar round out of the tube. We can now see his friend give him the fuse, I believe. We can now see the Ukrainian taking off the packaging on the rear of the mortar. Of course, with great care, because he does want to make sure that he can recognize the sponsor who did give him this product. Probably Raid Shadow Legends.
Все, мина оснарена, вышибник есть, пороха есть, взрыватель по возможности, когда надо, фугас, осколок переводится очень легко, проволочка вот эта снимается.
He's now taking a moment to tell us about what kind of modes that the mortar round could be used in. Apparently fragmentation or blast mode. So it's actually got multiple features, maybe more than the newest iPhone. And on top of that, when you drop this one, it actually does something good.
Это вроде как запобежный, предохранитель. Ну, она честно, жалко такой стрелять. Очень красиво, очень красиво. Да. Вообще, ну, красавица. Есть также...
We can now see him gently put down the mortar round. I wasn't sure. I'm not sure if it's live or not. I'm not sure if you drop that thing, it would hit the fuse and blow up. But we did see him gently put it down, and it may be live. I don't know. But now we can see him going and picking up one of the Polish mortar shells that the Polish have provided.
Есть также полька. Полька с парусами.
So with this in mind and seeing this video, we can clearly tell that Ukrainian soldier is going to have a great career after the war doing unboxing videos. There is no doubt about it. That guy did a very good sales pitch for that Italian mortar round, and we could see him actually... Apparently, he's really into the equipment that he's got in this, inside of this Connex box. But it looks like he was going to the back of it and starting to get out more stuff and tell people about it. So really cool to see. I feel, honestly, like he'll do great on YouTube. And so I highly suggest if that guy ever gets the word, or if someone is watching that knows him, make sure to go tell him to do unboxing videos throughout the entirety of the war about the Ukrainian stuff that they're getting from the West, if he can get his hands on any, because it would be incredibly popular. People would love it, and it'd also be very funny, and it'll also give us a lot of insight to what weapons are actually making it to Ukraine as the war goes on, because a lot of people have been asking those questions. Of course, a lot of y'all have been asking that as well, and I think they're exceptional questions, because while a lot of Western governments are saying that they're sending over equipment and such things like that, we never really get a timetable as to when it will be over there, or how much of it's going over there. Well, they do give us that figure, but they never really tell us anything beyond that. And so hopefully Ukrainians can start putting out videos like this, or tell us that they still haven't got something. So maybe people living within countries like the United States, Britain, Germany, and so on can, of course, reach out to their politicians and thwop them across the head with a newspaper and say, why hasn't it been sent over yet? So with that, it's great to see that this man is very ecstatic about the stuff he's gotten, and we're on to the next bit of Location Unknown news. Here in this clip, we can see the Ukrainian air defenses in action once again. I think some of this may have been taken pre-war, but still, it shows off a lot of the Ukrainian anti-air defense systems that we don't really get a large chance to see. That appeared to have been a Tor anti-air defense system. That looks like it's a Cube, most likely. We can now see it firing a surface-to-air missile. We can now see the Tor firing a surface-to-air missile as well. A very wide variety of systems. What's very interesting to me, and we don't see these much, are these kinds of radar installations that are used for some of the older anti-air defense batteries. I don't even know what the name of this one is. It's just very interesting to me because it looks like something you would use to irrigate a farm field, nearly. But of course, that's my layman perspective. While I try and know a lot about everything, I can't know everything in the world. Hope a lot of people do understand, but very cool video showing off a lot of Ukraine's air defense forces and what they're composed of. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can get a tour of a Ukrainian trench. I will be able to play the audio at the start, but I won't be able to play it as it goes on because it sounds like it's playing copyrighted music. But here's the video. First off, we can see a nice little table with some binoculars on them. We can also see that they put up a little poster here in the top right corner of the screen. I don't know what it shows or what it says, but a very interesting thing nonetheless. I wish we could get a little better view of it, but sadly it won't be shown in the video. We can now see him stepping down onto some fine carpentry work. They've actually put like wood flooring at the bottom of this trench, a very nice upgrade. We rarely ever see that. They also have sandbags around a decent amount of the trench. He's now walking into a dugout, and I have to mute it now because it has copyrighted music playing. But we can now see that this bunker, dugout, whatever you would like to call it, has a lot of water, some places to rest, made out of pallets, of course. They made a couch out of pallets. And it also apparently had a little viewport to the area beyond the trench. We can now see him walking around and looking at some more stuff. It looks like they may have had some spare food or supplies sitting on the side of the trench. And it looks, by and large, I don't know what's going on here. Oh, it's a little grill. For some reason, I thought it was a latrine and they were burning the excrement out of it for a second, because that's what the U.S. does, you know, is that they'll get all the excrement from the base and they'll drag it all into one spot. At least this is what they did in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they would just burn it in one massive pile. So I thought this was a burning of like a excrement from our latrine, but we can actually see that it's a small little grill that they're running. So very cool to see, and it's also impressive to see how far Ukrainian trench works have come over such a short amount of time. At the very beginning of this war, a lot of them looked to have been impromptu made, most likely hand dug and somewhat shallow, and as the war continues, much like we saw in World War I, the trenches have gotten more elaborate, better constructed, they now have wood flooring, and we can see that everything surrounding the trenches, supporting structures like bunkers, dugouts, and so on, are also getting better and better as time progresses. So very cool to see, and it's great to know that the Ukrainians are keeping on with the level of excellence that they portrayed so far. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians firing an RPG at the Russians. This actually looks like a very similar spot as to what we saw yesterday, where the Ukrainians knocked out a BTR-82 near the same position. It appears that before that BTR-82 was knocked out, about right there where the mouse cursor is, it appears that they were also engaging Russian units further down the way off the right side of the screen and trying to destroy them as well with what appears to be an RPG-7. And so, here's the video. We can now see him running out to the street, leveling the RPG, and firing it. We can then hear the sound of the explosion, and we can now see a soldier running out with the RPG-22, leveling it as well, and firing it. That's the end of that video, but impressive to see how quick the Ukrainians work, and also we don't see them doing any of the hanky-panky, like goofy circus stuff that the Chechens do, where they're nearly blowing each other's heads off with a backblast or, running into each other. This looks like, of course, like everything the Ukrainians do, very well put together, but done ad hoc. So very good to see, and it's always wonderful to know that we can get a lot of assurance from the Ukrainians themselves and the video evidence we see and how they conduct themselves on video that they are much better put together than the Russian armed forces. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a Stugna being used on a mortar crew. It appears that Russian tanks apparently aren't the only thing that a Stugna can be used on. We can now see that the Stugnas are being used on mortar positions as well. We can now hear that the missile is on the way and traveling towards this mortar. The mortar crew does not realize that their contracts are about to be ended early.
Нормально, вот как раз. Все.
And with that, it looks like those soldiers got an early discharge from the Russian military. If they did survive that early discharge, they'll most likely be given a bag of buckwheat and a postcard. And so I wish them the best of luck and fairest sailing on their ventures from here forward. Of course, they could just be, well, we're not going to go into that. But of course, it's very interesting to see that the Ukrainians are using Stugnas on mortar units. I'm not really sure why they did this. Of course, the Ukrainians are always making it clear that they are trying to limit their ammo usage as much as possible and make sure that they're using it against the right targets and as little of it as possible. And so I don't know why a Stugna was used in this particular instance to attack that Russian mortar unit, but still, I'm not going to complain. They wiped them out, that's for sure. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see an R-18 dropping bombs. Now, a lot of people have been asking where the Bayraktars have gone, and I think that the R-18 drones have largely replaced the Bayraktars on the front line. They are very cheap. They are civilian drone for the most part. Here we can see one of these R-18 drones. You can actually see that it appears to be an opticopter. So apparently it'll probably have a decent amount of lifting capacity. I don't know about its range. I don't really see a large area for batteries, but we do get the idea that these have largely supplanted the Bayraktars, maybe due to the Bayraktars being lost, or the Bayraktars are incredibly expensive compared to the R-18, and due to one or both of those reasons, we've now seen the R-18 pretty much take its place on attacking Russian frontline units. So before we go into this video, I just want y'all to know what an R-18 looks like, just in case no one's shown it. With that, here is the video of this R-18 attacking Russians on the front. Just today, apparently destroying a tank and a KAMAZ at the same time. Of course, I have to keep the video muted. It is playing copyrighted music. We can now see the drone flying over the plane. And one thing that's very interesting to me, and some of y'all may have noted this earlier, is that I was actually on Mercado's stream for a small while and actually hung out there for about 9 minutes or so. And that was very interesting to me because I got to see his analysis for one of the first times ever, and it was pretty decent actually. But the other thing that was very interesting is that he was kind of touching on the same things as well about rivers, and that's one thing that I find very important. I remembered that when talking about this drone flying over the plane, is that Ukraine is largely flat. If you think about the Midwest United States being flat, Ukraine's very similar to that. Very rarely do they ever have any hills of any kind, or mountains for that matter, and that's something that's been noted by every single invader of Ukraine since the dawn of time. Ukraine is incredibly flat, and so one of the few defensive positions that you can get by natural geography is a river. And so, you know, this is kind of sidetracking from the actual footage here, but I wanted to say that again, that when you're thinking about the war in Ukraine, major obstacles geographically for the Russians to advance over are rivers, highways, trying to push across a highway, and also small hills. There's not a lot of them, but there are some small hills out there. So we're now going to skip forward and check out this video of this R-18 destroying the tank in the KAMAZ. We can now see the R-18 looking straight down at this tank, and we can see what appears to be another vehicle over here, perhaps. We can now see the bomblet traveling on its way. It appears that that one fell to the right side of the tank, and so I believe that the R-18 is adjusting right here. It sure is. It's just going a little over to the side, and it's going to drop another one. Actually, we didn't see it drop another one right there. We now see it going for another vehicle. It looks like the KAMAZ. And we can see that the bomb dropped just beside the KAMAZ again. Very close shave. We can now see the R-18 dropping another bomb on the T-72, and it got it. It looks like it went straight through the turret, and of course that is a disabling hit. We can now see that the thing is going Rice Krispie mode. So with that, great to see, once again, the R-18 drones, of course, have supplanted the Bayraktars, but that does not mean that they're any less capable because they're just a souped-up civilian drone. Of course, large amounts of, I guess you could say, progress in the area of warfare is usually done by turning civilian equipment into weapons of war. If you look back through history, it was the rich guys in Britain who went and took their Rolls Royces and converted them into armored cars. And let me show you all that. That's actually a really cool history for Rolls Royce armored car. These were used somewhat in World War I and a decent amount afterwards, but a lot of rich guys in World War I who went to the front line said, hey, you know what would be cool is if we took our very, I guess you could say, ritzy Rolls Royces, plated them in armor, and then put a Vickers gun on top with a rotating turret. And everyone was like, yeah, that's cool. And then they couldn't really get used well because, of course, they get bogged down by barbed wire in the trenches. And so these things largely started to get used fighting the Ottomans in the middle of the desert, you know, like the Lawrence of Arabia kind of area. The siege of I believe Kut as well. There was a lot of places in the Middle East because it was flat and it was conducive to using these kinds of vehicles. But the Rolls-Royce armored car was a civilian car that was converted into military use. And we've seen that a lot throughout the course of history, specifically in World War I, because planes kind of started off in that category as well, where they would pretty much just take planes that were just lying around at the beginning of the war, and they would use them to take pictures of the other side, and then they started carrying around guns like revolvers and stuff on these planes, and then finally we started to see the British, the Germans, the French, and everyone fighting the war start trying to develop actual fighter aircraft that had machine guns built into the plane, or planes more fit for that role. And that was kind of like the birth of military aircraft. And so I think that we're seeing kind of in the same category the smaller drones like the R-18 that aren't the size of a Bayraktar or a Predator starting to make their mark on the field and showing that while the drones are small, they do pack a punch. Remember, everyone, size does not mean everything. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where you see fresh captures by Ukraine. And it's very interesting to see the new captures that they've got. We've actually got a wide variety of vehicles here. First, we have a KAMAZ in slightly used condition, missing part of the rear end of the canvas, but still, it looks like it's in somewhat decent running order. We can now see them taking a good look at this T-80BV that's been left in this field. Once again, one of Russia's older tanks in their inventory, not the best there is. But it's great to see that the Ukrainians have gotten a new one. We can now see a Ural 4320 right there that appeared to have been in better condition. I would say it's slightly used, probably has a decent amount of mileage on it, but I think with a little bit of armor all on the dash, that thing will be in running condition. We can then see them panning around, and we could also see a oh my god, come on, go back. We could see a BTR-82, come on, right here. And so, very nice. We haven't really seen the Ukrainians capture a lot of BTR-82s. We've seen them capture a lot of BTR-60s and also a lot of command versions of the BTR series, but we've never actually seen them capture a lot of BTR-82s. And so hopefully they'll use this one because they don't have a lot of these, and of course it's pretty neat. And also I just noticed, I didn't notice this before, but apparently there's a Russian taking a nap there. Of course, very tiring to fight a war, and so it looks like he's getting some rest. With that, that is the end of that little bit of news, and now we're going to move on to our last bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Russian tank cooking off once more. This Russian tank is cooking off in the middle of Nowheresville. We have no idea where this was. Oh, and now it's got copyrighted music playing. And we can now see that it's starting to toast up very nicely. And this Ukrainian is taking it all in and checking out this beautiful little fire. Now we can see that the fire's kind of petered out a little bit. It's turned into a bit of a smoke. Well, now it's actually starting back up again. And we can actually see the fire coming out of multiple, I guess you could say, cupolas or ports, if you would like to call them that. We can see fire coming out of the driver's port, and you can actually see them individually. We can see the fire first coming out of the commander and gunner's hatch, and then we can see it coming out of the driver's hatch later on in the video right there. So very interesting to see. And it does go to show that when a fire starts in a tank, and this will probably follow through with every kind of tank, the fire is going to escape upwards and out through the hatches. And so while the hatches, of course, are a benefit to the crew, it allows them to get in and out, it does vent all of the, I guess you could say, heat and fire that would come from an ammo detonation straight up towards the crew and out above them. And so if you don't get out of the tank quick enough, you'll most likely literally just sear to a crisp right in your seat. That's what I would assume. It seems to be logical. But with that, that is another Russian tank that has been destroyed today. And with that, we have now reached the end of this location unknown news segment and also our Kherson segment. So before we move on to the Kharkiv area and also the northern Donbass, we're going to take a second to answer 3 questions from the chat, and once we answer those questions, we're then going to cover the Kharkiv news and the northern Donbass news. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And real quick, before we move on to our questions, I just want to say to everybody, I forgot to mention it earlier, I just want to personally thank everybody for going over and checking out our merch store and buying our merch. It does help us run the channel just like the super chats do. So thank you to everybody that has bought the merch, and thank you for helping us support the channel. So moving on to our first super chat, we have a $100 donation from one of our channel regulars, Paolo Corradini, who says, I keep hearing people draw parallels between the current war in Ukraine and the winter war that we saw in Finland fend off a USSR invasion in 1939. You also referenced it a few times, and could you explain why the comparison is apt?
Well, first, Paolo, I would like to go straight into that question, but I always have to recognize support. And of course, you threw in a massive amount tonight, and it always is greatly appreciated by us, you know, Matthew and me here on the Enforcer stream. That is the only way we can keep running, and with support like that, we will always be able to keep running. And so I thank you very much for the support, Paolo. And now I'm going to answer that question. It's a very good question, and it is within my wheelhouse because my wheelhouse is nearly entirely history. And the reason why I made the comparisons in between the Winter War and this war is for 2 reasons exclusively. First, the Russians used multiple separate fronts at the beginning of this war, much like they used in the Winter War. If I pull up a map, Winter War offensives. Winter War offensive. Let's go onto Wikipedia. Hopefully they have a map of all of these separate fronts that the Russians had. Here we go. These are all these separate fronts that the Russians conducted at the exact same time over the course of the Winter War. It was a very short-lived war, much like this one seems to be right now, around several months. Let me go and check, actually. The Winter War was 3 months, 1 week, and 6 days. So it was around the length that this war has gone on at this point right now. But let me get back down here to this. You can see that there was multiple fronts. And up here in, well, down in Ukraine, we saw multiple separate fronts. We saw one heading towards Kyiv, one heading towards Chernihiv, one heading towards Sumy, Kharkiv, some pushing through the south. We didn't really see a lot over here near Severodonetsk. It was very slow movement for a while, and then it sped up and progressed really fast. But then we saw two separate prongs, well, really three actually. One to Kherson, one to Melitopol, and then up towards Zaporizhia, and then one to Mariupol. And so, at least in terms of all these separate fronts that the Russians had running at the same time, the actual offensive plans were nearly identical to what they did in the Winter War. The second point that's kind of contingent on the first is that because of these multiple separate fronts, there had to be multiple separate supply lines. And so, with multiple separate supply lines, everything gets so much more complicated. You have to figure out how to supply each of those hubs, and then have those hubs subsequently transport those supplies to the frontline units. And that becomes incredibly complicated, and that's where a lot of the Russians in the Winter War ran into problems, is because the offensive plans were so complicated, like we can see here, multiple separate fronts having to work at the same time, that management of them all effectively was nearly impossible. On top of that, the logistics chains fell apart, and this is actually historical for the Russians. They fell apart in World War II as well, and stayed in shambles until the United States started to provide hundreds of thousands of trucks through the Lend-Lease. Once again, historically, the Lend-Lease comes to save the day for the most part. But that's something very important to note, is that in those two regards, the offensive that we're seeing right now is identical to the Winter War. Another thing that is identical is that the reason why the Russians went with this offensive plan over Molotov's offensive plan, which was to literally have one strong offensive push straight up from Leningrad and then towards Helsinki. That was his plan. And the reason why they went with this one is because, one, they were wanting to up the Germans. Of course, the Germans had just gotten done with their blitzkrieg of Poland that had multiple separate fronts, and it was conducted without a hitch. It was a large success, even with the valiant defense from the Polish. The Polish really just stood no match to the Germans. And so the Soviets were trying to up them one and show that they could do the same thing. And also the reason why they went with this plan over the other simpler plan is because they thought the Finns wouldn't put up much of a resistance to the Soviets if they did invade. And a large amount of the world at the time actually thought that that was going to be true. Much like the modern day, analysts back then, and of course, professionals, quote unquote, said that Finland would not survive long because the Soviet Union was, of course, just so much more powerful than them. And so in every single regard, the Finnish Winter War is literally just a 70-year-old repeat of what the Ukraine war is right now. And so that was a superb question, Paolo. I have to say, I thank you very much for the huge amount of support. Of course, that's incredible. But the question is great, and I hope that explanation kind of weighs in a lot as to why the Winter War is compared so much to the current Ukraine war. It's nearly identical in every way. And also, due to the Russians picking a certain time of year, they actually picked the winter. That's why it's called the Winter War. They picked the winter to pursue this offensive, and the Russians, of course, due to their terrible logistical issues, weren't actually ready to fight in winter. They weren't able to provide enough winter gear, kind of like what the Germans would face later on in Operation Barbarossa. And so their armies literally started to freeze in position. But then again, that's kind of something that everyone faces, because that was faced to the Chosin Reservoir as well for both sides, the United States, the Chinese, and the North Koreans. But still, at the same time, that is why the Russians lost the Winter War, well, the Soviets, and we can now see them doing that again. Also, one other thing to keep in mind is that the Russians apparently lost 126,000 dead compared to Finland's 26,000 dead, nearly. We'll round that number up. And so you can see right there that the Finns had a kill-to-death ratio. For every one of their soldiers killed, they killed around 5 Russian soldiers. And so it's kind of very similar in that ratio as well right now with what we're seeing in the Ukraine war. And so with that, I hope that answers the question to the best of my abilities. Of course, someone brought up the famous Finnish sniper Simo Haiha. I think that's how that name is pronounced. Sorry if I butchered it. But yeah, they also had that guy going for them as well. A lot of people thought Wally would be that guy, but then Wally went over there and then he came back and then started saying not really good stuff about the Ukrainians, saying that they were unprofessional and going to get him killed. But I don't know. I mean, like, I'm not going to weigh in on that one too much. That was a little bit interesting to me. But with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, Paolo, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $50 donation from Scott, who says, here's pizza and coffee funds, and a little extra for updating and keeping your browser up to date and secure. I will sleep better tonight. Thank you.
Hey, well, I thank you so much for the support, and also thank you for noticing that I did update my browser. It was actually a lot quicker than I thought it would be, and it also updated all of the tabs I had immediately within like seconds, and they all came back in the condition that they were in. So I'm going to make sure I'm not going to be scared anymore of updating this thing. Apparently, it doesn't actually do anything to the maps I have up at the point. So I'm glad that you do appreciate that, and we will get some coffee and some pizza to, of course, soothe our stomachs and keep our minds running. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. It does help us out a huge deal. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to move on to the Kharkiv and Northern Donbass news.
And the last super chat of this segment goes to Max Power, who puts in a $25 donation and says, awesome coverage.
And I thank you so much for the high praise. Of course, I always try and make sure that the coverage is as best as possible, and I'm glad that a lot of people do appreciate it. I've also seen a couple of people saying this in chat, and I think I'm going to touch on what I was thinking about Wally a little bit. Of course, I don't want to bash him too much because he did go over there, and that was something. But apparently, from what I was able to hear, he was complaining that he wasn't really being used as a sniper, and he was also saying that his unit was nearly getting him killed. But the thing to me is that unlike the other conflicts that Wally's been in, where it was asymmetrical warfare against terrorist forces, this is an actual conventional war, and I think that's what threw him off, if I'm being honest about what I'm assuming. I think that in the face of a conventional war, which he's never been in before, he kind of, started to realize that this is a lot more frantic and a lot more fast-paced than, fighting some terrorists outcroppings in some mountains and whatnot in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I think that's why he may have come back. Once again, I got to respect the guy for going over there. I don't know exactly what he did, and I didn't really cover him much because I don't make individuals the, absolute, I guess you could say, apex of what we cover on the stream, because I feel like when you focus on the individuals over there, you start to lose focus on the big picture of what all of these hundreds of thousands of brave men and women are all doing together in this war. So I never covered them. That story, of course, came out later on, but honestly, I didn't really like the idea, considering that he's such a high-profile soldier, that he went over there and then he came back and started to rat on the Ukrainians. If his story is true, at least just keep it quiet and say something else instead of coming over and saying, "Oh, they were about to get me killed." And the other question is that if they got him in so many near-death situations, how come he's still here? I had a lot of questions about that story, but with that, I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to go into that too much. But that one was kind of weird to me. So with that, we're now going to move on to the Kharkiv news. Starting off in Kharkiv today, we don't actually have any news from the front lines themselves. It appears that they've largely gone quiet today, and so sadly I cannot report on the situation here, but we do know that the Ukrainians are exerting small amounts of pressure in different parts of this salient, trying to, of course, keep the Russians on their toes and hopefully put them on the, I guess you could say, back foot. So with that, unfortunately, we don't have any news from there. That's kind of what we know as of the moment. But now we're going to move into Kharkiv city itself, where we can see that Russian bombardments did resume today. Although we saw the food trucks out yesterday, it appears that the Russians aren't going to let the citizens of Kharkiv have any kind of peace. Here today, we can see that the Russians did bomb out a school very recently, around just yesterday. Here's the video.
Какой ужас. Боже, боже. Это что-то серьезное было. Это серьезное.
You can now see them surveying the damage, and you can see that the school in the center appears to have been completely destroyed. Of course, very unfortunate to see, and it's once again more evidence of Russian war crimes as they go out of their way to attack civilian infrastructure that we see no evidence of military activity near. A lot of people say that they may be striking these after the Ukrainians have left, but that's something that is very, very questionable to say, because you could say that about everything. You could say, oh, you know, they thought the Ukrainian soldiers were in this apartment building and then they left, but we still struck it and killed 17 people. So every single time they attack civilian infrastructure outright and we don't see evidence of burned out Ukrainian military vehicles or dead Ukrainian soldiers, I'm going to label it as a war crime, because that's what it is. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news in Kharkiv, our only other bit of news, and we can once again see that the damage has continued across Kharkiv. Here we can see oh man, Matthew's going to hate this one, but an all-destroyed BMW. I don't know if you can see the screen, Matthew, but I think this is one of your favorites. Yeah. We can see a destroyed BMW. I'm going to let Matthew actually talk about that car for a second. He's a huge fan of it.
Actually, it's probably better off being blown up, really, because some BMWs aren't worth driving.
Well, Matthew's got his opinions, but he used to be a big fan of this car. I think it's a BMW 2002 Turbo, isn't it?
Oh, okay, yeah, I just saw it. I really can't tell from that photo, but yes, definitely one of the first generations, I believe.
Well, that's still interesting to hear. Unfortunately, I don't know a lot about BMWs, but Matthew actually, actually at one point did collect model cars. You know, everyone's got something they want to do to pass the time. Honestly, it's a really cool model BMW 2002. I'm a huge fan of it as well, but he actually has a model of this car. He's a huge fan of it. Anyways, in the background, moving on from the car, we can see, of course, a small fire burned in that Khrushchevka commie block back there, apparently burning out 2 floors of apartments. And we can also see a building over here that appears to have been largely destroyed as well. And so, of course, it's very unfortunate to see that the Russians continue to attack and cause large amounts of damage to Kharkiv. I don't actually know when this damage was caused. It may have been caused earlier in the war, but it's still sad to think that people did live in these commie blocks and now they will never be able to again, or they may have been killed in them. And so, of course, more evidence of Russian war crimes, and very unfortunate to see. Excuse me, sorry about that. There's something itching in the back of my throat right now. So with that, we have got no more news from the Kharkiv area. We don't really have any news of the front lines near the Donetsk Reservoir. We don't also have news from the salient. And we also don't have any news from the Chuhuiv area or the Balaklia area. And so we're going to skip over those areas, and we're now going to move down to Izium. Today we've seen that the Ukrainians captured BM-21 Grads, and not only did they capture them, but they turned them around and used them against the Russians nearly immediately. Here's the video of the Ukrainians firing these captured Russian Grads right back at the Russian forces. Very cool to see, and it's great to know that the Russians are literally getting a taste of their own medicine. With that, we're now going to move on past the Izium area. Of course, not a lot of news coming from there. It seems like everything's largely ground to a standstill there, and I believe that the Russians no longer have the resources nor the time to try and push a meaningful offensive from this area. It appears in their minds that they're making a lot more progress from Liman towards Slavyansk than they ever made from Izium heading towards Slavyansk. So with that, we're now going to move towards the Liman area, where today we've seen that there has been damage to this village, which is named Shchurove, I think. I'm sorry if I did mispronounce that, but it appears to be some kind of a little resort village. As you can see, it has a large amount of hotels here. And so let's actually pull this one up on the map. Let me see if I can spell that by memory. There we go. Have it right there. Let's pull this thing up on Google Maps, put satellite view. And so, it looks like a sleepy little town on the Severodonetsk River. It's actually kind of pretty, and they have a little beach here, so I'm assuming that this is probably like a little resort town. So let's put this guy down on the ground. Apparently there's no street view? Let's put him down right here. There's a little picture here of what this town looks like. So now we've gotten a good view. We can see a church in the distance, a rusted fence, and we can see this little road. And it's got some sand on it. Very interesting. There's a lot of sand around here. I'm guessing it's because it's on the banks of the Severodonetsk. Any other pictures? There's apparently a picture right in front of the Dubok Hotel. So let's take a look at this one. Apparently this is not in front of the Dubok Hotel. This is apparently on the Severodonetsk River itself. Kind of a bummer. I want to see that hotel. Let's see what a hotel looks like in this town, actually. I'm interested. Yes, chicken. We can see here a picture of a lady by a fountain. We can also see, let's see, what else? We see 2 more ladies by fountain. Another chicken. They're big fans of chickens around here. It appears that the Russians were here before because they're chickens as well, as we can tell. It appears that they have a little petting zoo. All in all, it looks like an interesting little vacation spot right on the river, right near Lehman. But today we can see that that was no longer the case, as the town was hit by artillery fire from the Russians, and a decent amount of it in this video was destroyed. Here's the video. It appears that that house in particular was destroyed completely. We can also see that same church we saw on Google Street View there in the background. Same steeples and such.
Не, подвал вот тут, в этом доме. И там и там не подвал, а погреб. Я не знаю.
Very unfortunate to see a quaint little village like that right on the river being hit by artillery. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news from closer to the front lines near Lehman, where we can see that the Ukrainians have captured a BMP-3 today, largely intact with minor puncture holes in the sides. You know, not too much. Of course, you can probably patch those over. Here we can see the BMP-3 had a camo net on the top of it, and we can also see these small holes in the back of the tank that may have led to it being abandoned. Actually, correction, this is not a BMP-3, this is a BMD-4 because of the rear part of the tank. And we now see the Ukrainian, of course, parading in front of the captured piece. I don't know who in the world put BMP-3 as the caption to this video. Not to roast them or anything, maybe they just don't know. But that is certainly a BMD-4. I kind of had my question when I saw the camo net over the turret and it looked kind of boxier than a BMP-3's turret. I was like, is that a BMP-3? And then the rear of the tank confirmed it was definitely a BMD. So with that in mind, still great to see that they did capture a BMD-4, and it looks like they are continuing on with the defense pretty doggedly, and even if the Russians are pushing them back, although we don't have any evidence of that at the moment, to the Severodonetsk River, they still will have to deal with the very formidable Donetsk River. We're now going to move on beyond this area near Lehman. Unfortunately, we don't have any news as to the frontline condition, but we will try and get some news, and if we get any, we'll make sure to report it. We're now going to move to the Severodonetsk area, where we've gotten a little bit of news today showing the situation. Starting off, we've seen Russian Uragans in use in the area. So here's the video of that. We can see the Uragans on the move down this dirt road. The Uragans actually have a pretty short range. I think it's somewhere around 20-something or 30-something miles. And so while larger caliber rockets, they don't have the range. We can now see them launching an Orlan. We can now see them adjusting the Uragans to fire. And now I think y'all can. I think a lot of people who may have not known how important, although the Orlans are jank, how important destroying an Orlan is, because that thing is literally guiding in the fire of these Uragans. And so while the Uragans, of course, are not the greatest MLRS on Earth, a 203 or 207 millimeter rocket landing in the middle of your infantry unit is always not ideal, and so it's very important to shoot down those Orlans if you can, so that way the Russians don't get any kind of information as to where they can fire their artillery most effectively. Here we can see them inside one of the Uragans or in some kind of command post. We can now see the Uragans firing. We can now see the supposed landing of the rockets, although all that footage looks the same. It's always the same grainy footage, and I think it may be because they're using a Kodak camera. With that, we can now see the Uragans hauling off. It looks like they didn't even stow the rocket launches correctly. Let me make sure I'm saying that correctly. No, actually they did. It was just an optical illusion there for a second. And they are off. Hopefully that didn't hit a Ukrainian unit and cause a massive amount of casualties, but we did see them using an Orlan to guide the fire, which does let us know that it was probably aimed at something that they found. With that, we're now going to move on beyond the area outside of Severodonetsk in the north, and we're now going to move to the east, where we can see some Russians driving on a road, and apparently there's a lot of people over there who watch Apocalypse Now, because one of the guys inside this vehicle said, dude, it's like Vietnam. So here's the video.
О, полетел. Вьетнам, блин. Просто Вьетнам.
Did you hear it? He said, Vietnam, блядь. Let me go back and play it one more time.
Вьетнам, блин. Просто Вьетнам.
So, it looks like they've got some Apocalypse Now fans. I don't know if they have Wolverines fans, but they're about to find out that they will end up like the Russians in the movie Wolverines very soon. With that, we're now going to move on into Severodonetsk city itself, where today we've heard that the Ukrainians hold on to around 20% of the town, but we have gotten some reports that the Ukrainians apparently are conducting minor counterattacks in the city, and we do have proof to verify that today, as they did take several prisoners of war in their small pushes through the city. Here's a video of them holding these prisoners of war.
Андрей.
Андрей, фамилия?
Лубинцев.
Откуда сам? Быстро говори.
Шахтер.
Шахтер, кто командир? Бегом, бегом!
Скрипа.
Кто такой Скрипла, бля? Кто он? Командир чего?
Командир. Ну, наши... Что мы там внизу стояли.
Подразделение ваше название?
Пехота.
Какая в пизду пехота, блядь? Полностью говори.
Ну, я в этом не разбираюсь, честно.
Название как ваше?
Ну, ДНР.
ДНР. Народная милиция. Что говори, блядь?
Народная милиция.
Это то, что я сказал, блядь?
Нет, это и было народная...
Сколько лет?
Нет, 30.
Дети есть?
Да.
А какого
We
хуя
still
ты
hear. We can actually hear that they're so close to the fire to the front lines that the firefight is literally right behind them. And so this lets you know that this video was taken almost on the spot right when these prisoners were captured.
За деньги.
За деньги, блядь. Я понял. Вот такие занимаются хуйней, продают свою страну, блядь. Сними, сними. Молодой же еще, ёб твою мать. Еще все впереди, блядь. Надел эту белую повязку, блядь. За что? За зетку, блядь, пацаны. Да это ж фашистская херня. Да ну какой, блядь, заставили?
Я рабочий обычно.
На приеме. Где работал?
В образовании, школа.
В школе? Ёб твою мать. В каком городе, селе, в каком?
Амросенко.
Амросенко, блядь. А сейчас чуть не сдох, ебать, да? И вот такие укропы злые пришли, блядь, что ж пиздец. Что ж, блядь, взяли и не убили, нахуй. Вы нормально себя
Я
чувствуете?
вообще не воюю, как и сейчас.
Ладно. Ладно, мужики. Выключай камеру.
Понял.
Honestly, they almost act like they're going to the principal's office and dealing with the Ukrainians. Honestly, the Ukrainians serve up pretty light punishments to Russian war criminals and Russians in general, as they generally just give them life sentences, although we have heard the Russians, at least when the Azov was initially surrendering, saying that they ought to give them the death penalty or something similar to that. So very interesting to see. It's great to know that the Ukrainians are conducting very small counterattacks in the Severodonetsk area. Once again, I'm not going to get anyone's hopes up here, because while there are counterattacks being conducted, these may just be trying to buy time for a decent amount of Ukrainian forces to cross the Severodonetsk River, and then the forces that are holding the Russians off will then attempt to cross the Donetsk River as well. So I believe that this may be a delaying tactic, so that way they can try and continue on a steady pace with their evacuations of the Ukrainians. I've been believing so far that the Ukrainians have abandoned the city and they're going to push over to the other side of the Donetsk River and hold the positions over there, as it's much more defensible, and I believe that they would be in a better position. Not to give too much away about what the Ukrainians are doing, but that seems to be very obvious at this point. On the other hand, the Ukrainians might actually be prepping up for a counterattack, and then that will be interesting to see as well. With that, we're now going to move further on down, and we're going to cover the last 3 bits of the northern Donbass news before we move on to our next question segment, and then the rest of the news from around the world and the southern front. Moving on down towards the area of Kharkiv, we have actually seen something that was like Vietnam, blät, as we saw large helicopter groups from the Russian forces flying over the Donbass Don. So here we can see the large amounts of helicopters flying over the area. Just an absolutely massive swarm to what we usually see. Usually we don't see them working in pairs. Here we see a group of 6. So, I guess you could say that there's a lot of helicopters, Dawn, and they're flying over the Donbass, Dawn. So, with that, not really much to note there. Video pretty much speaks for itself. We're now going to move on towards the area of Lipove and Vasilivka. But one important thing I would like to note is that there has been a change to the front line. I've actually removed Rybivka and Herske from Russian control. As far as I've been able to tell, there's been no video evidence to confirm that the Russians do control these villages, and apparently that was a little bit of misreporting on my part, because I had gotten information that the Russians had actually taken these villages, but apparently they had not, as far as the evidence I've been able to get so far. We're now going to move on to the last clip, I believe. No, it's actually the second to last clip of the Northern Donbass news segment, where we can see a Russian perspective of the fighting near the T-1302 highway. Once again, before we start, I do want to give the general disclaimer that the Russians do make up a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily true, but it is interesting to see them try and give a perspective of what's going on their end near the T-1302 highway. So with that, here's the video.
За работой орудия приходится наблюдать блиндажей. Работает орудие очень быстро. Нанесли несколько ударов, затем расчеты прячутся в укрытие. Ну, соответственно, мы также находимся в укрытиях, чтобы ответный снаряд нас не поразил.
We can now see an MLRS firing. I'm not really sure in which direction and who it's heading towards. I'm assuming that those are most likely Russian MLRSs firing at the Ukrainians. But it's always hard to tell with the Russians that it could actually be Ukrainian film and they're claiming it's their own, you know. We can now see some Russian SPGs in dugout positions, preparing to fire at the Ukrainians as well. We now see the first one fire, then the second one. Apparently the second one had a misfire, the third one fired, and then the second one fired. So, always, of course, typical of the Russians to have some kind of malfunction on their artillery pieces. And I'm not exactly sure if these are SPGs. These may just be towed Mr. Bs. We can now see some kind of blob in the sky. It appears to be some sort of helicopter, although we can't tell what kind it is. We can now see another MLRS firing. Well, actually, no, it was a second helicopter firing off its rockets, and now it's hitting the floor as well. It's most likely a KA-52, or an Mi-35, or an Mi-28. We can now see that those are the Godivka SPGs used by the DPR, LPR, the Ukrainians, and the Russians to a pretty good degree. We can now see that these two helicopters is a KA-52 and an Mi-28, both flying in tandem. You now see the helicopters flying around the distance, of course not really doing much of note. That's always something that you can say about the Russians, it's not much of note. Now see them flying incredibly low over the cameraman. How low those helicopters fly is a testament in its own right to the Ukrainian air defenses and how strong they are. We now see another KA-52 flying over the cameraman. And with that, that is the end of that video. And very interesting to see that the Russians actually showed no sort of progress. They just showed some artillery fire and some helicopters flying around. As far as we know, the Ukrainians have held the Russians off as of this moment on stream. They've held back the Russians from the T-1302 highway and have kept it open for logistics to continue to supply the Severodonetsk and Lysychansk area. Hopefully, Ukrainians can continue to hold this highway as it is vital to the Ukrainian defenses further up the line near Lysychansk. with that, we're now going to move on to our last bit of Northern Donbass news before we move on to our next question segment, where we can see that some more M109s have been making their way to the front. Apparently, according to the caption here, these are American M109s. I don't know how old these would be. I don't know if the United States even really uses these. Let me check that, though. I may be very wrong on that. M109, U.S. Army. For some reason, I am wrong. These are still used to the present day. For some reason, I've assumed that we would have replaced that thing at this point, considering that the original M109 has been in service since the 60s, so it's nearly 60 years old as well, much like a T-62. But then again, one does have to keep in mind that SPGs don't really have to be upgraded all too much. It's not like they're facing new ATGM systems. All they have to do is lob a shell miles away at a target that they can't even see. So, sorry about that. I want to make that correction clear. Do not roast me on that one. We actually made that correction on stream immediately. I don't want to say anything that's wrong. So these are American M109s that have been sent over. Apparently the Americans still use these, which I didn't know. But here we can see them on the back of truck beds being taken across the country, and we can also see Ukrainian giving the thumbs up to the SPG being brought in. And I have to say, thumbs up for sure. I just saw someone say, I'm sorry, we'll cover that in a second. We can also see another M109 on a truck bed. And finally, it appears that it may be the same M109 in every picture, I'm assuming, but here we can see it in another perspective. Great to see the M109s are being brought in from all kinds of countries like Norway and the United States, and hopefully they can be put to good use, along with the crabs that Ukraine has gotten from Poland. So with that, of course, wonderful to see, and it's great to know that the Ukrainians will be able to continue on this fight with even heavier artillery systems. Now, I just heard a second ago, and I have to check this also, Matthew. It looks like we have some fun, naked fun. So we might want to get rid of that one real quick. But I just heard some news that is totally dissociated from the stream, but I have to check. England World Cup. Thank you, Matthew. England World Cup. Did England just win? I don't know if they have. We can't really see titles for that specifically. But still, I hope they win the World Cup. It's pretty neat. Of course, that's going to start a battle amongst the Europeans and everyone who's not an American that watches European football, as everyone's going to be saying, oh, no, my team should win. But anyways, with that, we've now covered the entirety of the Kharkiv and Northern Donbass news. So we're now going to move on to answer 3 questions from the chat, and then we're going to move on to the rest of the Southern Front news and also the international news, and then we'll go back to the question segment. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right. So first up from the Super Chats, we have a $25 donation from Kales, who says, will there be another special operation to defeat the Nazi snakes? Love the streams and keep up the amazing coverage.
Well, thank you very much for the support and also the high praise. And to answer that question, I think that if they were to go after Nazi snakes, they would end up committing a coup against Putin. I think he's the most Nazi snake there is in the world. And so if that was to happen, I don't think the Russians would have a government for too long after that. So I thank you very much for the support. I do like the joke. It was a pretty good one, and I hope I added on to it in at least some way. And with that being said, I thank you so much for the support. And we're moving on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Junebug72. This is the one with the 72 at the end of the name, who says, at least 4,031 people have been killed, including nearly 200 children, says the UN Rights Office. More than 4,000 civilians have been killed in Ukraine since Russia's invasion began on February 24th. Could be greater.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, Junebug. Of course, you've been a long-time viewer, but sadly, I hate to say this, but the number's actually much higher. From the last number we were able to get, the civilian casualties are somewhere around 50,000. And so, you know, I wish it was around 4,000. That would be incredible to think that those few civilians had died over the course of over 3 months of fighting at this point. But sadly, so many more have died. We don't even really have an actual number to assess. That's just an estimation at this point. We already know that there are loads more people who have died in Mariupol alone. Just as an example, we've heard that something like 50,000 civilians may have died in Mariupol. And then that doesn't account for all the civilians that have been killed around the rest of Ukraine as this war has continued. But still, the civilian casualties have been massive, and it's incredibly unfortunate to think that those poor people got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the Russians didn't care and ended up killing them out of their own disregard or deliberately. And so hopefully those Russians are held accountable, and I do thank you very much for the support, and we will always try and help to report the best news as possible and also run the Sunday fundraisers. And with that being said, I thank you so much once again for the support, Junebug, and we're moving on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Captain Chris 1220, who says, I'm pretty sure the pilot who was vaping was wearing a gaming headset, LMAO.
Let's go check that real quick. Now that you said that, let's go find the helicopter one. Huh? I don't have the helicopter one here? Oh. Let me go through these. Oh, right there. Time for a smoke break. Let's see if this man has a gaming headset. He does! Oh my god, he has a gaming headset. Honestly, I like the red on it. That's actually kind of good. But yeah, he's got a gaming headset, it seems. So very good catch right there. I didn't notice that earlier. And so that's actually pretty freaking cool. And so with that, thank you so much for the support and also bringing that up to us because I didn't notice that one single bit. I thought that was a normal headset. So with that, thank you, and we're moving on to the next question. Actually, the last question of this segment, and then we'll be returning back to the Southern Front news and also the rest of the news from around the world.
So the last one of the segment goes to Dima Tikachenko, who puts in a $20 donation and says, people from the first video from DNR Army, they all have pre-existing medical conditions like hernia. Few guys are blind or have sick family members who needs care, so they don't want to fight. Go Ukraine.
Very interesting. I thank you very much for the support and also telling us what they may have been saying. That's, of course, very important to know, and it's very interesting to know that the DPR and LPR kind of seem to be singling out, I guess you could say, the crippled people of their society. I'm not really sure how to describe that the best way. Disabled, crippled, I'm not sure, you know, whatever the wordage y'all are getting the picture. It seems like they deliberately go out of their way to pick disabled people, you know, people who are blind or have some kind of medical ailments, because that's almost all we see on the front lines with the DPR and LPR is people who don't look physically fit for military service. And so that's very interesting to me, and also that may be leading to incredibly low morale on the DPR and LPR side, considering that a lot of those soldiers may not even be fit for service in any way. So with that, I thank you so much for the support and also sharing that tidbit of information with us. I actually didn't know that, you know, and of course I can't speak Ukrainian or Russian, so I didn't understand at all what they're saying. So I thank you very much for sharing that with the rest of us, so that way we could know the reasons why they're saying they'll no longer fight. And so with that, we're going to move on down towards the Southern Front. We've reached the end of this question segment, and we're going to cover all of the Southern Front news and also all of the international news, and then round out the stream with another question segment. Starting off in Mariupol, we haven't gotten any more news of the defenders, but we did get someone who drove through the center of Mariupol and showed us the absolute level of devastation that still exists within Mariupol at this point in time. Have to mute the video because it is copyrighted. But we can see apartment block after apartment block completely destroyed. We can see that all these buildings have largely been burned out, and we know that this is definitely downtown Mariupol. We've actually seen video footage of this before the war, and this lets you know how bad off Mariupol has been. Around 90% to 95% of the buildings at this point have been completely destroyed. And as this video goes on, you can tell that that number is certainly true, as someone is actually taking a drive around the center of Mariupol. You can see the mark of shrapnel and shells as they hit the side of the buildings and chipped off the concrete and paint. You can see the burn marks on every single building as fires raged through each of them and gutted them. And you can even see where the small little shops were that people used to frequent, and they'll never be frequented again. Most of these buildings will never survive beyond this war, most likely. And so with that, That's the end of the video, and that's another grim look at what the Russians will do to a city that holds up for an incredibly long time. Once again, that's no reason for the Ukrainians to give up. Of course, that's a reason to continue to fight on, so that way they can make sure that that kind of damage will not reach the rest of the country if the Russians were to continue on rolling through it. And I don't think at this point they ever will. With that, we're now going to move from Mariupol, which is one port city, and to the next, further down at Berdyansk. And today at Berdyansk, we saw a very peculiar event occur that we really have no information about. So let's take a look at this and tell me what y'all think this is. I don't know about y'all, but that kind of seems like a saboteur attack or a partisan attack. Not really sure what you want to call it, but it is a large assumption to assume that it is a partisan attack. But still, there's really no other explanation for this large explosion at Kherson port, rather than this was something deliberate by the Ukrainians who are in occupied territory. Hopefully that is the case, because that would be great to know that the Ukrainians are striking back at the Russians still under occupation. And so hopefully it caused a decent amount of damage, and also freaked the Russians out of the port of Berdyansk once more. With that, we're now going to move beyond Berdyansk, and we're now going to move even further down the front towards the area of Zaporizhia, where today we've seen the 128th firing an artillery piece that appears to be a Mitz-to-be at the Russian forces. Here's that video. Great to see, and hopefully that round is on the way to hit a Russian tank, BMP, or infantry unit directly. With that, we're now going to move even further down the front, and we're actually going to pass over Kherson. We covered that earlier in the stream. That's also the reason why the video has the title it does tonight. So if you're here for the news that was in the title and also the thumbnail, make sure to just go back to the very beginning of the video when the news started off, because we covered that immediately. We're now going to be moving down south of Odessa to a city called Zatoka, where today we've seen the Russians strike a railway bridge for about the 30th time. Of course, I'm exaggerating. I don't know the exact number, but they have hit this bridge multiple times. And here in this video, we can see them hit it again and apparently not take it out again. Here we can see the missile hit the bridge. We can, of course, see the large amount of sparks and, light flying up from the explosion as it hit the bridge. And we can see that it did suffer some damage, but the bridge is still standing by and large, and the Russians have failed again at taking it out. Very funny to see that the Russians have continually tried to take out this bridge, but at the same time, on the flip side, this gives you an idea of how difficult it's going to be for the Ukrainians to knock out the Kerch bridge, even if they have the ability to reach it. So with that in mind, we're now going to move out to sea, where we can see near the port city of Sevastopol today that caliber missiles were fired in the distance as someone stood on shore and watched. Apparently these cruise missiles will be flying towards the Lviv area. This was on the 1st of June, but the news was only reported today, and so it was included here on the Day 99 news. Here's a video of those missiles taking flight and heading towards Lviv, most likely to hit civilian targets. That's the end of the video, but we could see a large amount of ballistic missiles being launched back into Ukraine. Also, kind of as a weird contrast in between the normal world and the war world, we can actually see a child playing in the water while the missiles are launched in another film made by another person around the same time. Here's that video. So you can see the little kids playing in the water, and behind them, the Russians are trying to kill off civilians in Ukraine. It's a very interesting contrast in between the innocent and the not so innocent further out at sea. With that, we're now going to be moving outside of Ukraine, and we're now going to be covering the international news. Starting off in Istanbul, we have heard today that the Bayraktar is on the way. We also have a picture of this Bayraktar that the Lithuanians raised the money for, and we can see that it has a flag of Lithuania on it, and it will be sent to Ukraine here in the future. According to this caption over here, upon learning this, quote unquote, Bayraktar will gift a Bayraktar TB2 to Lithuania free of charge and ask those funds go to Ukraine for humanitarian aid. Now that part kind of threw me for a loop, and I'm going to explain why. The Lithuanians raised these funds specifically to buy the Ukrainians a Bayraktar. The Bayraktar company then hears about the Baykar company, the Baykar company then hears about these funds being raised and then says, we're going to give Lithuania the Bayraktar, and then all the funds that were raised to buy the Bayraktar for Ukraine can go to humanitarian reasons. I think the people of Lithuania were very clear that they wanted that money to go towards a Bayraktar for Ukraine, not for Lithuania, and then send all of their funds to humanitarian aid. So while that's of course nice, and the Lithuanians are getting a Bayraktar out of the whole thing, I still think that a Bayraktar ought to go to Ukraine. That just makes sense, considering that they are the ones fighting the war. And while humanitarian aid is good, it's always good to replenish the stocks of drones that they have if they have lost any of these. And so, with that in mind, very interesting bit of news. And it is what it is, I guess you could say. So we're now going to be moving out of Turkey, and we're now going to be moving into Eastern Europe, in the area of Slovakia, to the capital of Bratislava. We're going to see that Slovakia will also be sending some SPGs. One may think that these are very similar to the Dana SPG, and I would agree, they look very similar. Apparently, though, under Slovakian service, these are called the Zuzana 2 self-SPGs, and apparently Slovakia will be giving 8 of these to the Ukrainians. Once again, a great addition to their artillery units, and hopefully these will be put to great use. We're now going to be moving out of Slovakia, and we're now going to be moving into Lviv. Well, actually, we're going to use that as our rounding out for tonight's news. Stick around. It's a great little piece of news. It's wonderful to see. So we're now going to move up to Stockholm, actually, in Sweden, where we've seen that the Swedish government has declared that they are going to deliver anti-ship missiles to Ukraine. And these are very interesting. I've never heard of these variants before, but apparently they're a variant of the Hellfire missile that has been converted to a short-range anti-ship missile. Very interesting. Haven't heard of these before, and I would like to see what these will actually do in combat. With that, we're now going to move from Sweden and on into Russia, our second to last bit of news for tonight, where we can see a man playing a Ukrainian song right near the Kremlin. A lot of my old-time viewers may actually remember this was the only song that led into the stream. This was before I got the Ukraine anthem intro and all that stuff. This was like the protoplasmic era on this channel, but I actually used to play this exact same song on this channel. This Russian man is playing the song right under the walls of the Kremlin, and the Russians are so ignorant to Ukrainian culture and also their own patriotic music that this little kid's dancing to this guy playing the song, and the mother's recording the kid dancing, and they're having like this little moment where they're like, oh, you know, yay, Russia, and meanwhile this guy is actually supporting Ukraine. And so here's the video. Also, to add a little bit of additional context to this, you may be wondering what's in the background here, and that's the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which is where, like America, the Russians keep dead unknown soldiers entombed. And so this is very interesting to me, and also it looks like he's using a Han or Panther, and I actually have that exact same accordion. It kind of sounded like that too. So if he does, very good playing on a Honor. That's kind of a little hard to do because mine is a... actually, it's like a button accordion, so it doesn't have any keys like a piano. It actually has multiple buttons. But still, very big balls on this guy, just to be frank. Sorry for the language there. But this guy has got some courage to be doing this right near the Kremlin, right in front of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, as people are walking up to pay their respect to dead Russians. He's playing a Ukrainian patriotic song. Honestly, huge kudos to the guy. I'm glad he's got that kind of bravery. There's not a lot of people in Russia anymore that do. They've been beaten down by the government. But still great to see that there are some people out there who are making passive statements against the war. With this, we are now moving on to our last bit of news before we get to our question segment that will go on for the rest of the night. And here in Lviv today, we've seen that a celebrity has arrived, and unlike some other celebrities from the West that were kind of greeted in a pleasant way but didn't really get a huge amount of, I guess you could say, audience or praise or shouting or cheering, an absolute celebrity known around the world at this point arrived in Lviv today and got a hero's welcome. Patron arrived in Lviv. I'm going to show you all this video. It is the cutest thing. And so here it is. Patron is in Lviv.
Oh, yeah.
Міна не відчуває патрона, і він може її знайти. Сьогодні він також трішечки сумує. Роман пес, з яким він дружить, так.
Бачите, який чемний, він не хоче втікати, він все терпить.
And so that's the end of the video, but it is a cute little video of Patron, and of course he has a massive fan base. It appears that the kids love him, and I can't blame him. I love the dog too. I'd like to meet it someday and pet him, because this dog has become a celebrity over the course of this war. Also, I love how they held him up here like the Lion King. Let's go back to that. They held him up here like he's the chosen one on the Lion King. And also, you can see this kid drew a little Patron dog, which was really cute as well. And also, I think he's a better, I guess I could say, drawer than I was at that age of dogs. I can never get the head right, and he got it a lot better than me. Sorry about that, y'all. Unfortunately, while I do drink coffee, for some reason, I just yawn spontaneously, so please forgive me for that. But still, with this, we are now going to be moving into the question segment, and also, that is the end of tonight's news here on day 99 of the war in Ukraine. Tomorrow will be day 100. I hope a lot of people hop on and listen to the day 100 news. I'll also be trying to make a special little intro tomorrow for day 100, kind of showing, in my mind, this is what I'm going to make the video about, showing the course of the war and how it's gone, and the clips that, of course, we've collected here on this channel. And also, I'm going to show some key points on this channel's history as it's covered the war as well, because a lot of y'all have been around forever, and I bet a lot of y'all would love to go back and see some of the segments that have become so famous at this point on this channel as running jokes and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to go and make a video tomorrow that'll be added on to the countdown, and I think it'll be pretty cool, honestly. But with that, we're now going to go into the question segment. So if you were here for the news alone, it is over. If you are new to this channel and you did enjoy the news, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps out this channel a great deal, and also it allows you to keep up to date with when we run these streams, which isn't actually that hard. We run these streams every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays, and we cover the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine every single day. Also, we upload daily summaries every day of the week, except for days where I'm off doing something, like this Monday on Memorial Day when I was reenacting. But we upload summary videos every single day, showing highlight clips of the war and giving very small summaries as to what's happened so far. So with that in mind, I thank you all once again, and with that, we are going into the question segment. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and first up from our super chats, we have a $20 donation from FatLong36. He says, if history shows true, something to be said about the sacrifice that one must face. Gentlemen, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and I do have to agree that history shows that you can't ever have freedom without the shedding of blood. I forgot who exactly said this. I believe it was actually one of the founding fathers of the United States, but they said the tree of liberty is watered with the blood of tyrants or something like that. I forgot who exactly said that. It may have been a French Revolution quote. But that quote's fairly true. If you want to keep your country free, you always have to be willing to defend it with your life from foreign invaders, and also sometimes people from within who may be looking to overthrow the government. That's always been a social thing throughout all of history, is that someone's always trying to overthrow the current government or whatever. But anyways, with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and I do agree. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Freedom First, who says, "Hello, y'all, and thanks for the awesome job. I love it. Enforcer, can you go over the parts and additions to the AK? Also, which modification do you think is most beneficial? Hashtag Leaf Spring Battalion, hashtag nuts, hashtag how farted, LOL."
Well, I thank you very much for the support and also the high praise. And there are a million modifications to every single gun. If I went over all of them, I would be here all night, but I will go over some of the ones that I consider more important. Starting off, let's pull up a picture of the AK-74, which is the standard rifle that a lot of people use. Also, if you really want to get a good idea of what an AK could actually have put on it, while video games aren't a perfect source, and I highly do not recommend buying this game because it is made by a Russian company, Escape from Tarkov probably has the most in-depth library of additions, modifications, and parts that you can put on any gun in the world. But I highly do not recommend buying that game. It is run by a Russian company. Unfortunately, I did buy it before the war started, well before the war started, like 2 years ago. So that never crossed my mind then, but it certainly crossed my mind now, and I highly recommend that no one does the same. So here's an AK-47, and it's standard, I guess you could say, layout. It has the normal plastic foregrip. It also has the normal plastic solid stock. The first thing I would do to this gun, adding modifications to it, is I would add a vertical foregrip on the front. A lot of people kind of diss on vertical foregrips and say you can hold the gun just fine, but I have to say that in my experience of shooting guns, vertical foregrips can never be overstated in how much easier it makes it to handle the gun. That's just me. And you know, of course, that's just my opinion, but that's one addition I would be looking for, is getting rid of the foregrip and also replacing it with some kind of Picatinny rail foregrip, perhaps, if they do have that. For the AKs, and maybe something else like an M-lock, I'm not really sure, but putting a vertical foregrip on that would be a must for me. The other thing that would be very important, starting from the basics, would be to add some optics onto it. While you can shoot with iron sights fairly well, I've always shot with iron sights, never really used a scope, and I've been able to hit about 1.5 inch diameter at around 250 yards with the 1903. You know, obviously, having an optic is much better than using iron sights. So I would definitely recommend that one of the first additions would be to add an optic. But of course, I think you would have to have some kind of modifications, at least to the dust cover on top of the AK, for that to be possible. Moving on from that, you may want to change, I guess, the flash suppressor. I'm not really sure what that is on the front of the AK. I think that's actually a gas discharger to try and make the recoil more manageable. Not exactly sure, don't hold me to that. But I would try and replace that with either a flash hider, if that isn't one, I feel like it kind of is, or a suppressor. Suppressors, of course, while in the United States they're incredibly expensive, around the rest of the world they're fairly cheap. In Britain, you can actually buy them in like the hardware aisle at a normal, I guess you could say, hardware store, because if you own a gun over there, you just kind of get the automatic right to buy a silencer as well, because there's noise ordinances over there saying how loud gunfire can be near certain areas. So that's a little interesting and tidbit about British gun ownership, but it's not like a cakewalk over here in the United States. But still, I would say that those three, optics, vertical foregrip, and suppressor, would be the stuff I would go for. Everything else is additional, like a laser, kind of pointless. Flashlight, kind of pointless. At least in my opinion, you know, that's just my opinion. You know, don't take it for granted. But still, I would consider those the three most important additions to make to an AK. There are loads. I mean, there's endless. You can take off the pistol grip and all kinds of stuff. So I hope that I kind of addressed that question in a way and kind of kept it a little bit brief, but I do thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question, at least in some way. Of course, I'm not an expert on firearms, while I, of course, am very familiar with them and have used a decent amount of them. I don't know everything there is about every single one, and so I may have not covered some things, but hopefully I covered most of them. And so with that, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Ryan Hughes, who says, "Incoming cash."
Well, I thank you very much for the support, Ryan. Of course, it always helps out our channel a great deal. And without support from our viewers, this channel couldn't run. And so I'm always appreciative of every single person who puts in support, because without y'all, the channel wouldn't exist and nothing beyond it would. And so with that, thank you. And we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have another $20 donation from Ryan Hughes, who says there was more confirmed info today saying that Putin is seriously ill. If this is true, does this elevate the risk of nuclear war or diminish it? I've been here since day 4, and I haven't missed a day since.
Hey, well, welcome. Well, not really welcome. Well, thank you for staying on so long. We actually, a lot of our viewers came in on day 4. Before that, our channel, well, my channel, because no one was doing it at that point rather than me. Like, I had no mods. Matthew wasn't here. It was literally just me. At that point, I only had around 100 subscribers, 110-ish that night. And on day 4, that's when, like, 1.7 thousand people subscribed. And it was impressive. It blew me away. I literally remember getting off the stream and freaking out. Actually, if y'all want, I could pull up that stream. I could go all the way back to it and show y'all that little clip where I freaked out and ended the stream, because I was blown away. I literally ran upstairs to my mom. I was like, Mom, it blew up. I was like, oh my God, it blew up. It was really cool. But actually, well, thank you for staying around for so long. It's always great to hear that we have viewers that enjoy the stream a whole load and have been here for nearly 95 days at this point. And that's really cool to me. And actually, real quick, I am going to pull that up because it was a really cool moment, and also it's a little bit of nostalgia for me. A lot of y'all may have remembered that. Oh, look, the Enforcer is streaming. Very neat. Anyways, let's go to the channel. Let's go down to videos. Let me scroll through all the videos I've made over 100 days of war. So let's see here. Ukraine survives. I think this is it. Day 4? I think it is. This is day 4. Yes, this is day 4. Kind of crazy to listen to my own voice. But let me see where the stream ends. Oh, it's right here. It's right here. Hang on. Let me get to it. They're stopping their advance. True. The U.S. invaded Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan. Almost all Arab countries have differences. Okay, so you know what's crazy? And I'm going to touch on this for a moment. Back then, I had so few viewers that I could answer everyone's question. And of course, there were no super chats at that time. The channel wasn't able to do that. And so I would go through, because literally there were so few questions, I could get to all of them before the end of the stream. I would go through the chat and I would just scroll through the whole thing and answer everyone's question and address everything. Sadly, we have so many viewers at this point that we get thousands of chats a night, and so I can't answer all of them. But that was a really cool thing back when it was a possibility. Israel bombs Palestine and the Gaza of Afghanistan. I believe that's true, yeah. How about Stalingrad Part 2? I don't know. I think propaganda bots have arrived. Yes, they have. So let me skip forward. I believe it, because I'm not trying to, like, crush people's speech. They went protesting in Russia back then. True, yeah. If these talks don't work, boss, I got intel. If you need some, just... Oh my God, how am I supposed to respond to all this? Oh, here we go. Nazi Putin. I don't know what that means. It's about to blow up here in a second. Putin a Nazi, so we'll keep that there. Chill with the spam. Oh wow, there's a whole bunch more talk. Oh God. Wow, there's so much. Oh, wow, there's a lot. Oh my God, how am I supposed to respond to all this? How many people are watching the stream? Jesus. There's like a I also didn't have a second monitor back then, so I literally pulled up YouTube on the monitor that was streaming to pull up my stream to see what was actually going on. Oop, stop streaming people on here. Oh my God. How am I supposed to respond to all you people? There's 3,200 of y'all on here right now. What the hell am I supposed to do? Yeah, I think I need mod assistance now because this is wild. Jesus, welcome everyone to the stream. Oh my God, I cannot believe this, y'all. I mean, like, this is blown up. I've been getting a couple of hundred views for days. Holy shit. That was one of the few times I actually cussed on stream too. I was literally like jumping out of my skin at that point. It was insane. I couldn't believe it. And what's crazy is that I considered that big when it happened, and there were only 3,100 people watching. And right now, in the question segment, which is where thousands of people leave the stream, we only have, we have 5,500 people watching right now. And that's really crazy to me, but still, it was huge. The channel literally went from 100 subscribers the day before to 1.7 overnight. It was insane. But anyways, I'm not going to like run this video the whole way. I'm not going to show the whole freak out. Also, another thing that stopped after like day 4 is that I used to actually roam through Reddit, but then I started to run on things that were very questionable and get my channel in a decent amount of trouble. So the Reddit section actually went away because I actually checked on the news as the stream was going on right then. But sadly, that had to get removed. But this was a really cool moment in channel history, and this will probably be included in the day 100 video tomorrow, showing like landmark things on this channel and like where it was and where it's gone and where it is now. But that was really cool. And also, I see a lot of people in the live chat right now talking about that moment. A lot of y'all were around for that, and it was just really cool. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. Kind of touching on the day 4 thing, it's really cool to hear that you were around that night when everyone started to come in pretty much. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And Enforcer, I don't know if you had a moment to look at the poll currently. Just out of curiosity, the poll was, if you had to choose, which firearm would you have? People had the option of choosing an AK-47, a Q Honey Badger, a Daniel Defense Mark 18, or a Barrett 50 caliber. And it looks like the majority of people would have an AK-47 followed up by a Barrett 50 cal, which is quite interesting.
Dude, no one liked the Honey Badger. Just for y'all
Probably
to know,
not a lot of people know about it.
just for y'all to know, Matthew has been like talking to me about honey badgers a lot. He's becoming a big fan of them, and it looks like none of y'all share his taste, and like only 13% of y'all voted for the honey badger. So with that, that's kind of funny. But also with that, it's very interesting to see that poll. I didn't know you actually put that up, and so with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $50 donation from Mycroft, who says, I wanted to say thank you to the Enforcer and Enforcer Matt. I appreciate being able to come on here and express my thoughts and opinions with like-minded people, minus these pathetic Russian trolls. Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. And at the beginning, well, really, it's since the beginning, I've been getting rid of Russian bots, even before the streams became big. I don't like trolls at all. Like, it's really hard to say that because while I'm a huge proponent of free speech, well, that's kind of getting a little bit political, but I do have to say it is something that we always strive to do, just kind of touching on what our channel actually does. We always strive to make sure that the stream is an enjoyable place to be, because, you know, it would be pretty tough otherwise to be here. You know, there's a lot of streams out there that allow pro-Russian bots to get on and say pro-Russian stuff. And while it's always nice to give everyone's side a piece in the discussion, I found out very early on that the Russian side is always full of bots, and they're always insane if they are people. So with that, I hope that answers the question, and I thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Minecraft. You and Paolo Corradini tonight are some of the largest super chatters, and y'all are going to help this stream continue to keep on running, along with everyone else who sent in a super chat. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment. And of course, we always like to know that we are what people look forward to every single night in terms of the stream. And so with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Ryan Hughes again. And thank you very much for your continued support, Ryan. You're absolutely killing it tonight. He says, anyone that witnesses the torture, murder of innocent civilians and remains unbiased is no better than the people committing these heinous acts. Staying silent in the face of evil is no better than evil itself.
I would have to agree with that, and that's another reason why I can't really say that there's like equal reasons. It's like you can't say the Russians have a point in obliterating a whole entire residential block and killing 1,000 people. You really can't say that there's a point to that. You know, there's no sense to that. That would be like living in the times of World War II and going, well, I mean, like the Germans had a reason with the concentration camps. That wouldn't make any sense. Like, who in the world deserves to be thrown in a concentration camp and killed or worked to death or something like that? Like, no one. And so, you know, that's why That's why while in the future the channel will be unbiased and report everything with an even scope, right now I do have a large bias to support Ukraine because they're obviously in the right and they're not the ones killing thousands of civilians over the course of this war. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, Ryan. I can completely agree with that, and I think that pretty much reflects what I think when I run this stream. And so with that being said, I thank you very much for the support once again. Of course, the support's greatly appreciated. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And just to seal the deal on the poll, the AK-47 won, and then some people wanted the Barrett 50 cal. And I'm not sure about the people that wanted the Barrett. You really can't bring that anywhere, but it's pretty cool.
That's true. I mean, like, you know, but then again, you know, I've seen people carrying Barretts. We've seen Georgians carrying Barretts during this war. Barrett M82, wasn't that what you put in?
Yes.
It's a recoil-operated semi. What's the weight? Ooh, yeah, you're right. Around 29.7 pounds. That thing is heavy. Apparently, it was used in the Troubles. Do you know about that, Matthew?
No.
Well, we'll save that for another time, but that was a really interesting little event in Britain's history. But with that, very interesting poll there, and we are on to the next question.
And up next on our Super Chats, we have an $18 donation from Michael, who says, missed the conversation around the Ukrainian Navy.
Missed the conversation around the Ukrainian Navy? Is that what he said?
Yes.
There really is no conversation for the Ukrainian Navy. The Ukrainian Navy is really more of a coast guard with small coastal boats, and also their only destroyer was scuttled at port in the early part of the war because the Ukrainians were scared that the Russians were going to reach the port and capture the destroyer intact, and then it would have been used against the Ukrainians. So sadly, there isn't really a lot of discussions about the Ukrainian Navy because by and large, they're almost non-existent. But I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the question in a way. And with that being said, always very appreciative of everyone who does support this channel. It helps us out a large deal and helps us keep running. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $12 donation from Duncan VR, who says, Mr. Lunchtime took a bite out of Mr. Overall's leg. Under investigation, Putin's blown-up doll has been stolen. KGB have a long list of suspects. Spam, it's not ham. Don't put mayo with your spam.
Well, thank you very much for the support, but why did you have to attack me at the end? Spam goes well with mayonnaise. I don't know who's eating it with mustard, but that is the way I eat Spam every single time. Like cheese, mayonnaise, and Spam. It's a good combination. It tastes really good. People can fight me over that one. I'm going to stick to my guns. Spam with mayonnaise is good. But also, I love the other jokes that you threw in there. Also, you know, like, especially the one about Mr. Lunchtime biting Mr. Overall's leg. That's really pulling all of the Mr. characters that I've made throughout this war all together into one. So, of course, I thank you so much for the support. And also the nice little jokes there. Of course, that got a good chuckle out of everyone, I think. And so, with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Zach Jeffers, who says, Zelensky is the true Giga Chad.
Zelensky is a Chad, that's for sure. I don't really get into a lot of modern meme history. I've heard about the Chad a little bit, but I don't think I've ever heard of the Giga Chad. I've also seen someone called me based and red-pilled in the live chat, and I've heard that said before a couple of times, but I really have no clue what based and red-pilled means. But if I am based and red-pilled, I guess I'll take that as a compliment. I don't know. But with that, I thank you very much for the support. And if that is a compliment, which I assume it most likely is, I entirely agree that apparently Zelensky is a Giga Chad. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that weighs in on the question. And with that being said, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Ole Wolansky, who says, what I was trying to say last night is that I appreciate you recognize your biases and try to be objective. These are great qualities to have in studying and practicing law and politics. Honesty.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I think that is entirely true, and I think that's something, touching on politics, of course, whenever I touch on politics, it's an equal critique of both sides. I never try and say that one side's wrong over the other. Really, honestly, you can go with either direction from either party, and you'll end up really in the same place either way, you know, in any country. But to kind of weigh on that one a little bit, that's something that I think would be very appreciated in modern politics, is if someone was just honest. Like, You know, if the situation's rough, just say the situation's rough. Don't sit there and try and sugarcoat it or, you know, play the blame game or anything. I just feel like that would be a better way to go about things. But not to touch on it too much, I feel like a lot of well, really every party does that these days, at least being incredibly dishonest. And you know, I don't really know how people buy that politicians are being honest to them. You know, because I don't think any of them ever really are. But with that, I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the question, at least in a way. And with that being said, thank you very much for the support. It does help us out a lot. And we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Greg Carmen, who says, Snakebite Army.
Well, sadly, we're not changing our moniker to that. I'm going to keep this thing the Leaf Spring Army because that is the tradition at this point. But I will have to say that, well, really, honestly, the Snakebite Army would be Putin's army. You know, because he slithers around and he bites people. So sadly, I think we're going to stick with the Leaf Spring Army. That might be what we call the Russians from now on. But with that, I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment in a pretty good way. And also, I did like the little bit of humor there, Snakebite Army. I like that a little bit. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, and we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Spencer P, who says, clothing jokes aside, they show true bravery. We'll need more if Russia wants to end Putin's madness. In their shoes, most wouldn't mutiny. What kind of support for Putin is in the so-called separatist areas?
I'm not really sure what kind of support there is in the separatist areas. They usually fake a lot of the polls that are made in Russia and also pro-Russian countries. And so while on paper the support is huge, we don't really know. Of course, we know they're dirt poor. We can tell that by how well their army is funded and equipped, and it's not funded or equipped at all. So I would believe that considering that they're probably very impoverished compared to their times when they were part of Ukraine, they're most likely not very happy with the situation, and the common person doesn't really care or support this thing all too much. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. Once again, that's an assumption. We don't actually have any hardcore evidence about what people are thinking down in there. There's just not a lot of information on it because they're almost like hermit countries at this point. But I hope that that does answer the question, at least in some way. And I thank you very much once again for the support. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And moving on, we have a $10 donation from DJ Bonebreaker. And also, DJ Bonebreaker, it's good to see you again. And how's that remix coming, by the way? But anyways, moving on, just joking, by the way, DJ. He says, this really is turning into a replay of World War I. That unit mutinying is a very reminiscent of the mass mutinies on the Eastern Front of World War I in 1917, not long before the October Revolution and Slava Ukraine.
And also, I thank you very much for the support, and I also thank you for bringing that up. Mutinies started to become very common near the end of the war. I didn't actually hear of any British mutinies, but we did hear a lot about French mutinies over 1917 and 1918, and we also started to hear of German mutinies at the end. Specifically, the Germans literally started to fall apart from the inside out, as some of these mutinying German units would start creating like little communes within Germany, like the Bavarian Commune and such things like that. And when you think about that, that's really interesting because wars, not to sound like Fallout or anything, you know, war never changes. War does change a lot, but the underlying aspects and basic principles of it never really do. Mutinies have been a common thing throughout all of history, and it appears that the Russians are dealing with those right now as well. And it appears that it may become a very widespread issue, most likely due to how things are going. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope we hear that remix really soon, and I'm just kidding. If you aren't actually working on a remix, don't worry, it's fine. We're just kidding with you. But still, I thank you so much for the support. It helps out this channel a great deal. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from BC Skyman, who says, those are civilian soldiers from the Donetsk region that do not want to fight anymore. One soldier has 4 children. 2 of the soldiers have thrombus veins, and 1 soldier has an elderly father.
And I'd have to say, when you really hear those kinds of stories, while, of course, you always have to root for the Ukrainians in this war and subsequently the destruction of Russian and pro-Russian forces, it's always unfortunate to hear about the tough situations that some of those soldiers are finding themselves in, like having old fathers at home that just, you know, they need help, and they're not there to help them anymore, and they're on the front lines, and they have medical conditions as well. And, you know, the whole entire situation is pretty rough when you look at it, especially for those poor DPR and LPR troops that are being dragged from their homes and they're not even fit for service themselves. And they have a whole bunch of pressing matters in their own households that they're trying to deal with and they can't anymore. And so I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does weigh in. And I thank you very much for providing us with actual translations as to what those soldiers were saying. And so with that, I thank you once again. It always helps out our channel a lot and helps us to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a whopping $100 donation from one of our channel regulars, Steve2848, who says, some time ago, you showed a vid, how many tanks does Russia really have and where are they? Covert Cabal at time mark 733. One of the tank maintenance men pulls out an accordion. It must be tuning the engine. It would explain a lot.
Well, I thank you very much once again for the massive amount of support, Steve. It's, of course, greatly appreciated, and you've done that a pretty good amount over, like, the last week and a half, and we're always very appreciative of a large support. And so I got to thank you very much from the bottom of my heart once again for helping us out. To answer that question, how many tanks does Russia really have, and where are they? Let's see. Time mark 733. One of the tank maintenance men pulls out an accordion. I don't really remember watching that video, actually. I've shown a lot of stuff on stream. I've actually streamed for about 300 hours total at this point, so sadly I don't remember all of it. But if I did show that video, and the guy did whip out an accordion in the middle of trying to maintain a tank, that's not exactly ideal, I don't really think. Of course, I play the accordion. Also, some people said, what, you play the bagpipes? And I don't know if I misspoke or what, but I actually play the accordion, the bagpipes, and the balalaika, just to kind of cover that one real quick. But it would explain... unfortunately, Steve, I hate to say it, but I'm not really sure which video you're talking about. But I can try and answer the question about how many tanks the Russians have running. They most likely have around 13 to 1,600 left in the theater or left in the entire nation that's in running condition. So in that regard, I don't think they will be doing incredibly well, at least within the armor situation, as another month or two rolls by. Also, to try and cover that a little bit more, if you're talking about the logistics of maintaining, repairing, and keeping these tanks running, I would have to agree that it's most likely very shoddy at best. We know that the Russians are very incompetent, have very little training, and most likely the mechanics that are working on those tanks have no idea how to actually work them. So with that, I hope that addresses the question in some way, but I do thank you for the massive amount of support, Steve. It helps us out a great deal, and we're always very appreciative of it. It helps us to keep running, and it helps us to look forward into the future. And so with that, once again, thank you very, very much. And we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have yet another super chat from William Allen, who puts in another $20 donation and says, fried Spam with mayo, lettuce, tomato, and onion, better than a burger for breakfast. Oh my God.
What?
All right, wait, is he saying he wants to eat fried Spam with mayo and lettuce?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. No.
Matthew, there's something wrong with you, man. Spam is fine. Like, have you ever eaten Spam?
Yeah, it's nasty.
I don't remember you eating Spam, but I love Spam. Like, I have to agree with William here. Spam is good. Well, you know what? Well, we've already run a poll on that Spam good or not, and a lot of people said no, which was really weird. But I'm going to stick with you, William. Spam is good, and anyone who says otherwise can just live with it, because the Spam is delicious if you do it the right way. Of course, frying it up is the best way, but I can actually eat it just straight out of the can. Well, not straight out of the can. It has to be on like a sandwich or something, but it's still good to me. I still like it. So with that, William, I thank you very much for the super chat. Also, I would have to agree, that actually sounds pretty good. It sounds kind of like a BLT without the bacon. You just replace the bacon with the, Spam, and then you replace the tomato with an onion. So it's not really a BLT. It's more of like a Spam sandwich, but still, I think it sounds pretty good. And so with that being said, thank you so much for the support. Hope that does address the comment. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from James Lynn, who says, I saw two reports. One, Wagner Group took heavy losses. And number two, Ukrainians have sucked the Russian into a trap in Severodonetsk. Russians have hit heavy defenses and took heavy losses and have retreated.
I've heard that as well. I've actually heard that the Wagner group is taking heavy losses in 2 areas. First, I heard that in Kyiv, because they were supposed to have been sent in to kill the president, and then they got wiped out, according to what they said. They said the commander and everyone got killed trying to kill Zelensky. Then I heard that they took heavy losses in Popasna, and now I hear that they're taking heavy losses on Severodonetsk. And while I don't want to discredit that kind of information, I kind of find it weird that the Wagner group has been destroyed at about 3 different places at this point. And they still retain their original commander. I'm kind of finding that a little bit hard to believe, but I'm not going to discredit it. They may have taken heavy losses. Maybe they're getting some kind of replenishments or reinforcements. That's always a possibility. That seems logical. But at the same time, it's weird to me that they've been destroyed in 3 different places and they keep on going. But to answer that other part of the question, yes, I did hear that the Russians apparently ran into heavy defenses that the Ukrainians had set up, and they've now been repulsed, and the Ukrainians are now counterattacking, and the Russians are desperately trying to hold on to what they've gained over the past few days. That may be true. I don't have enough information to go off of right now. And also, Zelensky said there's not enough information to know how that's going right now. We're going to wait and see. And so, like Zelensky, I'm going to wait and see how that turns out before I actually start reporting that there isn't a successful counterattack underway. Because this may just be a delaying action while they continue to retreat across the Sievierodonetsk River. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the question in a way. Matthew, you didn't even put up the right answer. Anyways, with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And I'll be interested to see the results of that poll. But moving on to the next super chat, we have a $50 donation from one of our channel regulars, John Boyer, who says, "So are the Ukrainians possibly getting U.S. Predator drones in the near future, maybe on the down low? Grateful for all that the Enforcer and Enforcer Matt do. Slava President Zelensky and Slava Ukraine."
Well, thank you so much for the great support, John. It always helps out the channel a lot. And that's kind of like the new thing that I say is like a repeating thing. And I hate that, y'all. I wish I could come up with different things to say, but I want y'all to know that it's always greatly appreciated. But anyways, to answer the question, yes, it's on the table and they're discussing it right now about sending some Predator drones over, but we don't actually know if that's serious or not. For a while, they waffled on the M142 being sent over, and now they're finally sending it over. So I don't know if this is going to take that same path or if that's something that the U.S. is just going to go, all right, there you get drones, and then they just get them. Some people said that I've heard this a bit, and I was thinking there's a logical counter to this argument, although it's a decent one, is that if the U.S. gave the Ukrainians Predator drones and then they got used, the Russians could use that to say the United States has drone operators in America operating the drones in Ukraine. And I don't really think that argument would have a lot of merit, because the Turks have been sending Bayraktars to Ukraine, and the Russians can make that same argument about the Turks' Bayraktars and saying that there's a drone operator in Turkey that's operating that Bayraktar in Ukraine. So I think we could actually get away with sending them over there and allowing the Ukrainians to use them. So I think that that's a possibility. I think the United States would send those over well before they'd ever send over any actual aircraft. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, John. And also, thank you so much for the appreciation of what we do. We always try our best, and I'm glad that we can deliver as much as we possibly can. And also, Slava Zelensky and Slava Ukraine. And so with that, I thank you once again so much for the support, and we're moving on to the next question.
And moving on, we have a $10 super chat from Vasily, who says, "I read this book in a school library. It was about World War I pilot and talked about the progression of air warfare from reconnaissance to dogfights. I forgot what it was called, and I wonder if you read it."
I think I've read a book very, very similar to that, but unfortunately I can't remember the name of it either. But World War I aerial warfare is incredibly interesting to me, and also, one day I hope, in the very distant future, that I could get myself a pilot's license, at least a recreational one, and then go and fly the little World War I planes, you know, like the reproduction ones, like the Sopwith Camel or the Nieuport 28s or something like that. I've always wanted to do that. I'm a huge World War I reenactor, but beyond that, I think it would be really cool to just do that in general, because those things are so cool. Everyone, like all the World War I pilots, always said that those things just turned on a dime. They were incredibly cool to fly. I got IL-2 Sturmovik Flying Circus to actually try and fly one of those things, and I have to say, they are very cool. And so I wish one day that I could fly one of those. Maybe this YouTube channel will lead me to a point where I can make a video about riding in one, you know, like a lot of YouTube channels have done, because that would be cool enough to me. But still, I've been a huge fan of World War I planes, and obviously planes throughout all of history. But World War I planes were quaint, they were very neat. And then after the war, you know, the governments just started to hand these things out like party favors. Of course, they'd get rid of, well, really, sometimes I guess they wouldn't even get rid of the machine guns. Because back then there was really no laws stopping people from owning machine guns, specifically in the United States. But then they would just hand out those planes after the war, and they would become the barnstormers, which would start off air shows and all kinds of things. Honestly, it's really cool to look at the history of everything, because nothing ever just appears. You know, like air shows just didn't start happening. There's always a progression that leads up to what we have today, and it's always a cool and interesting story to hear. And I would have to say that for the large part, as far as everything is concerned in the modern day, I would say that World War I was that catalyst for most things that we consider modern at this point. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment in a way. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And real quickly, the poll was settled. It appears that most in the chat believe that spam stands for spare pork and meat. And I would tend to agree with you on that. That's what I thought as well.
All right, I want you to put up another one. You disgraced my delicious spam. Put up these as answers. Spare pork and meat, spiced ham, or spare, you know, like, I don't know, just put, like, I don't know, just say it doesn't have a meaning or something. But really, I want spare pork and meat and spiced ham to run face-to-face with each other. And I want to see what people think is the actual meaning of spam. Because you didn't put up the right one the first time, and I felt like spam got disgraced. And so with that, if you can put up that poll here for me real quick, and right after you do that, we'll move on to the next question.
And moving on to the next one, we have a $10 super chat from DJ Bonebreaker again, who says that song the guy is playing next to the Kremlin is Oyu Luzi Chervona Kalnia. I'm probably saying that very wrong, but hopefully people understand what I mean. And could get you out of jail time or worse for playing it during the Soviet era.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I also thank you for telling us the name of the song. I've played it a lot, but unfortunately, I never really memorized the names of the Ukrainian songs because, of course, there are a load. And I know that I said I don't really care about grammar Nazis, but it's always a little bit of an annoyance whenever I try and do anything. Like I used to say Slava Ukraini, Herom Slava a lot, and of course I'm just trying to show my support for Ukraine. But there are some people that do not care if you're trying to support the same cause or what. They're going to nitpick you to the point that you just stop doing it. And that's why I don't say Slava Ukraine or Herom Slava a lot anymore. Because of that, you know, it just got annoying, and I was like, I guess I'll stop. And so that's kind of the same thing with that, is that I just don't really remember song names, because I'm like, if I try and repeat them, there's going to be some grammar Nazi out there that's like, oh, you know, you got it wrong, you know, and it's like, So, but yes, that is the name of the song, and also, thank you very much for sharing that little tidbit of information about what would happen if you played that in Soviet times. I actually didn't know that, and that's very interesting to hear. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and hope that does address the comment in a way. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from BC Skyman, who says, why does the U.S. telegraph everything they're going to give to Ukraine? Why can't they just be giving everything they need to win the war? Slava Ukraine.
Well, there's a couple of reasons why. And not to, of course, I don't get political on this channel. But every time the United States, in particular because a lot of my viewers are Americans, so that's why a lot of stuff is telegraphed, it seems, well in advance, is because us sending aid to Ukraine for some people in the government is a huge boost in their minds to their popularity and the chance that they can get reelected. So that's why a lot of stuff is telegraphed in advance, is so that way some politicians can sit there and like pretty much bask in the credit of doing that. That's one reason. Another reason why, and this is another valid reason, is so that way the Russians aren't freaking out and trying to lie and say that we're sending over stuff that we're not. That may be another reason. There's multiple reasons why, but honestly, my main concern with that, and my main point, and what I think is most likely the case with that, is that people are trying to line themselves up for re-election or trying to garnish themselves some popularity with the public, and so they broadcast the stuff well in advance before they actually send it. And that's not party A or party B. That's both of them at particular points. So with that, I hope that answers the question, and I do thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And real quick, Enforcer, I'm seeing multiple people saying that spam stands for Special Processed American Meat. I've seen multiple people say that, and they say they get that directly from spam.
Spam. You know what? Let's just pull it up. Let's pull it up. All right, we got to figure it out. The brand life, the museum. They got a museum? It's got to be in Hawaii. Wait a minute. What? They really have a museum, Matthew?
That is something.
Yeah, look at that. That's wild. Very wild. Look, they have a little spam man. And they have a spam can man. Wow, this is insane. Hopefully I'm not going to get copyrighted for showing this on screen. But maybe I could become a spam ambassador. A spam-bassador. Oh, that's really cool. Anyways, let's see. Spam brand life. Will that tell us about it? Spam. Will it tell me the name? What is the spam brand? Potato starch, sugar, sodium nitrate, water, salt, and pork with ham. That's the only ingredients in spam. This is how it's made. But why? First, the pork and ham. Okay, wait, hang on. I've got to figure this out, y'all. Why is it called spam? There are 12. Okay. 12.8 cans of spam products eaten every second. That's interesting. Spam products are sold in 44 different countries. Over 8 billion cans of spam have been sold. Big bin in England is 1,163 spam brand cans tall. Interesting. We're using spam as a form of measurement. The canjo is a banjo made using a spam brand can. Interesting. Guam residents consume an annual average of 16 cans per person. Well, that means it must live in Guam. Hawaii eats 7 million cans of spam. Come on. Just give me the name. Why in the world do they have to make this a secret? Come on. Brand life. Let's go back to brand life. I know that this is... Come on. They aren't going to tell me. Are you kidding me? There's restaurants. Oh, they're all Hawaiian, though. What does spam stand for, since the spam website wants to be Special Processed American Meat? But if I scroll further down, there will be another one, like shoulder of pork and ham. And then there's another one that says spiced ham. What is this?
So I just saw in the chat that Anita says, Hormel says that the meaning is only known by a small circle of former executives. So maybe it's a secret.
Maybe so. It's going to drive me crazy, though, because I wish we had an answer as to what that actually meant. But with that, we're going to end our search for what spam means right there. Of course, we are a little bit pressed for time. And also, how many super chats do we have, Matthew?
So we have approximately 10 left.
Okay, so not that many. So with that, we're going to answer these 10. Of course, we're not putting a cutoff at the moment right now. We'll answer the next 10 super chats, and we'll go into the live chats. And if you do throw in a super chat, we will make sure to answer the question if there is one attached. Also, real quick, another merciless plug. Make sure to go check out the merchandise that is on the store. We do have a limited edition Lee Spring Army Wants You merchandise shirt on the store. It will be gone by Saturday at midnight. At Eastern time, so make sure to get one. It does support the channel, and also it's really cool looking. One other thing is that kind of like a side effect of the shirt, but it's also physical advertising. And so if you would like to spread the word of our channel to other people, that is a great way to do it, is by getting a shirt and wearing it. So with that, I thank you all once again so much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Electrostatic One, who says, Severodonetsk is a good place for a grinder. Lysychansk can keep the tip of the city clear with artillery, and then at night, the Ukrainians have better optics.
That's true. I think you could I think I could agree with that. That's actually a pretty decent assessment of the situation, and I think that is actually something that we could see unfold down there. Perhaps, you know. So yeah, I mean, like, maybe it might be a good meat grinder. We know that Lysychansk is on higher ground compared to Severodonetsk, and there is almost no ground separating Lysychansk from Severodonetsk. They're nearly the same city. So the Ukrainians in Lysychansk could just fire down into Severodonetsk. And so with that, I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way, and I think that's actually a pretty good way of looking at it. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Kaltenberg, who says, if you need law school advice, feel free to let me know.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. I will make sure to reach out if I do have any questions about law school. You know, like, it's going to be an interesting little journey. I don't know if the YouTube channel thing will keep on going through law school through the first year. I hope that it will. But at the same time, I don't know how difficult law school in its first year will be. But that's a real good distance away. That's about a year away from me right now, so hopefully the war will have been over by that point, so that way I can continue on doing these streams until the very end of the war. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support and also the offer of assistance. That's very nice of you. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have yet another super chat from William Allen, who puts in another $20 donation and says, I also love the bacon-flavored Spam. My 87-year-old dad asked me why change Spam. My answer was, everything's better with bacon.
Well, thank you very much for the support. And I've actually had the bacon flavored Spam, and sadly, I think this is where our Spam romance will end. I'm not a big fan of the bacon Spam. I've tried it before, but for some reason, I just don't think it jives with the original kind of thing with Spam. So I'm actually going to have to side with your dad on that one and say, why change Spam? I don't, like, it's okay. I mean, like, it's not bad. I could eat it, but it's not like my preferred flavor of Spam. You know what I mean? But anyways, I thank you so much for the support. It always helps us out a great deal. And also, it's very interesting to know that there are Spam fans in here along with me. And so with that being said, I thank you so much for the support. Once again, William Allen, you've put in a decent amount of support for the night, and it's always greatly appreciated. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we are paid a visit by none other than Jason Bourne. He puts in a $10 donation and says, Spam or Vienna sausage?
Jesus Christ, is Jason Bourne. Well, anyways, I thank you very much for the support. And to answer that question, I would pick Spam any day over Vienna sausages. Vienna sausages aren't bad, but still, I think that Spam is a superior doctor's sausage. That sounds really wrong, but there's a history to that. But I think it's a superior form of doctor sausage compared to Vienna sausage. And a lot of people are going, what on God's earth is a doctor sausage? That sounds like something you would say in some kind of clandestine film. And the answer to that is that the Soviet Union, when it was just forming in the 20s and 30s, was trying to figure out how to mass produce food. And something that the Soviets, well, specifically the communists within the Soviet Union, wouldn't admit is that the capitalist mass production system in the United States for sausages at the time was primo. And so they actually sent over some of their agricultural and food experts to the United States to figure out how we made sausages because they obsessed over it. And then they came back and they started creating all of these abominations. Well, they're not really abominations. It's very similar to the American form of sausage. But they created all of these abominations of sausages that were very weird. Well, not really weird, but they looked weird. And so they were called doctor sausages after a while because they were so, I guess you could say, like weird and clinical looking, and no one really knew what was in them, that they were saying that a doctor would have had to have made the thing. So that's why they started to be called doctor sausages in Eastern Europe and the Soviet countries, and also the post-Soviet country, well, the post-Eastern Bloc countries like Poland and so on. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the question, at least in a way. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have an $18 donation from Not a Channel, who says, this is for vegetables.
Well, I will definitely try and eat some vegetables. Actually, I was thinking for a second, I don't eat a lot of vegetables, but I actually do. I eat loads of vegetables. But I thank you so much for the support, and I also thank you for putting some towards a vegetable fund. Of course, I enjoy my Spam and all of my meaty things, you know, like like pulled pork and steak and all that kind of stuff. But it is always good to have a side of vegetables with them, you know, because it's just good to balance out the palate. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. Of course, it's greatly appreciated, and we will try and put it towards some vegetables when we can. So with that being said, I thank you so much once again for the support. It helps us out a great deal. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from BC Skyman, who says, "Why does the U.S. Telegraph?" Oh, wait, hold on a minute. That's a duplicate. Let me move on from that one. So up next, we have a $10 donation from Hoodoo, Texas, who says, "Americans have a right to know. That isn't a bad thing. We are not at war officially. If we were at war, a bit different. And there are some things classified. Politics equals democracy."
That's true, and I thank you very much for the support. But still, at the same time, it's so heavily broadcasted that that it's clear. You know, it's obvious that it's being done as a political thing for the most part, with how televised it is and how slow our response is into actually sending it over. Because the U.S. way of sending over supplies so far is, we've got the M777. We're going to be giving it to them. Oh, now the week goes by with the M777. Everyone's ready for us to send it, right? Yeah, yeah. And if we send it, we're going to be heroes, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay, we're going to be sending it. And then the next week goes by. Okay, we're getting ready to load it on a plane. It's going to be over there. And then you hear nothing about it. Rather than, you know, M777's just on everyone's minds. They're talking about it. And then about 2 weeks later, after all of this hype, they finally say, okay, the M777s are over there. And then they finally arrive. And so it's like a whole entire month process, it seems, to get anything over there. And if we were actually serious in providing this support quickly, I feel like we could get it over there within under 2 weeks, if we were trying to not make it a massive political ploy, for, you know, either side of politician to go and say, I did this, look at me, you know, re-elect me. I feel like we could get it done a lot quicker. But yes, that is true that we do televise those things a lot because we are a democracy and people ought to know where their tax dollars are going. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And moving on, next up we have a super chat from Fernando Silva, who puts in a $10 donation and says, according to Nikita Khrushchev's book, Khrushchev Remembers, spam was a godsend for another hungry group, Russian soldiers in World War II.
And I thank you very much for the support. And I actually didn't really know a lot about that, but that is something true. Coca-Cola also made its way to the Russians in World War II as well. And so I wouldn't think that spam would be too far behind Coca-Cola, you know, because those were kind of like the two things America had going for them. And then lamb chops, but that's a whole other story. And those things kind of died after the war. But I thank you very much for the little bit of info there about spam and where it actually made its way around the world. And I'm sure that the Russians probably just threw that into the category with the rest of the doctor's sausages, because it's kind of similar. And so with that, I thank you once again for the little bit of information. Always cool to hear little tidbits of things I didn't know from the chat. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And moving on, we have an $8 donation from Manzur Lunchtime, who says, pro-Russians are already disseminating so-called confessions on YouTube of a British 36th Marine from Mariupol named Aiden Aslan, now a POW trashing Ukraine. Just a heads up, do not fall for it.
Oh, I don't. Whenever I see those videos, I'm like, you know, they probably beat it out of this guy, or they told him he'd get better treatment. And then some people cave under that. You know, there was a lot of stuff like that in Vietnam. Where American prisoners would come out and they would bash the American government. It's because they would be told they'd stop being tortured if they did that. So I never really take too much of a grain of salt on those things. So I thank you very much for the support and also letting me know. But I am one step ahead on that one. I never take those seriously. And so with that being said, I thank you so much for the support, and we're going to be moving on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Honest M, who says, translation, we are refusing to fight because Mr. Lunchtime is eating up all the rations.
That's true. Probably. I mean, like, you know, he already bit someone's leg. Although I feel like if Mr. Lunchtime bit that guy's leg, it would just be gone. But still, I thank you so much for the support. And also the nice little joke there. That was actually a pretty good one. So if everyone could give him a good laugh in the chat, I think that'd be greatly appreciated by him, because I honestly thought that was pretty good. It brings in Mr. Lunchtime back into the fold. And so with that, thank you so much for the support and the great joke. And we're going to be moving on to the next question.
And real quick, let me recognize 2 super chats without comments. We have a $5 donation from Artem Burnin, and also another $5 donation from William Allen. So thank you very much to both of you for your support to the channel. And we are moving on to our next one. Next up, we have a $5 donation from Junebug, who says, Enforcer, why does USA have to tell exactly what they give Ukraine? Why not just say we're giving Ukraine kick-ass weapons and not let Russia know?
Well, one thing is that the Russians would most likely know. They probably have SFB agents in Poland that look around the border often, and they're probably already cataloging what's going into Ukraine. Because while the Russians are incompetent, you know, they're I guess you could say secret service detachments, their intelligence units are probably pretty decent. You know, in the Cold War, they did better at mapping Western cities than Western countries did. So I feel like they would know the information anyways, and it's not really too much of a threat to operational security for either the Ukrainians or the United States, because while we can say the number, the Russians don't actually know where they're going on the front lines. And so that's one reason why we're not really too careful with saying what we're sending over. And also another thing, once again, it is probably a big political thing to make sure that people stay in favor that are currently in office, whether you be from Party A or Party B. I've seen politicians from both sides doing that. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question, at least in some regard. And so with that being said, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from B. Dobson, who says, save the Bayraktars for the good stuff. Use the cheap stuff for the FWD OBS stuff.
I don't know what the abbreviations stand for, sadly, but I would have to agree that I guess you use the cheaper stuff on the Russian equipment that's being used right now. Really, honestly, if the cheaper stuff can get the job done the same as the expensive drone, I honestly don't see the reason for using an expensive drone. Of course, the military is always trying to find out how to make the cheapest equipment. That's not because they're cheapskates. That's just because they're trying to find out how to field as much equipment as possible. And so you always try and go for the lowest bidder. So, you know, that's something that a lot of people say is, you know, if you're ever using something military grade, just remember they went with the lowest bidder. While that's not the best thing to do in like the normal world, in the military world, that's the ideal thing to do. Because what would you rather do? If you had $1,000 on an M16 costs $500 and you get 2 M16s for a group of 10 guys, or you had $1,000 and you could get 10 AK-47s because each one was $100 a pop, and you can equip all 10 guys with an AK. Obviously, you're going to go with a cheaper gun because you can equip more people with it, and in the end, hopefully by the numbers of equipment alone, you'll be better off. So that's kind of what I'm looking at there with the drones, is if the R-18s are doing the same job as the Bayraktars and as well, and they're cheaper, there's an inherent benefit there, and that's that they're more affordable to use. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment in a way, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And we now have 8 super chats remaining. So up next, we have a $5 donation from Paul Plonsky, who says, Hi, Leaf Spring Army, Milwaukee here. Enforcer with U.S. MLRS, we are now sending, will Ukrainians now be able to strike the Kerch Bridge? Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and it's also cool to hear we have soldiers of the Leaf Spring Army in Milwaukee. But to answer that question, sadly, it won't be able to reach the Kerch Bridge. We've been told that they will not be allowed to fire this missile into Russian territory. Well, fire the MLRS into Russian territory, which would include the Kerch Bridge. And also, the U.S. is not giving the Ukrainians the long-range missiles that the M142 can use that would be able to hit this bridge. So sadly, the farthest this MLRS will be able to fire is around 50 miles-ish, just a little bit over or a little bit under. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Frostbit, who says, just to touch on the AK mods, yes, they make Picatinny and M-Lock handguards, and a lot of modern AKs have mounts on the side for the receiver for the optics.
That's true, but I don't think a lot of the Ukrainian and Russian guns have that kind of stuff. While that's something that we see a lot in the United States, because of course in the United States you have a lot of custom gun culture, you know, where a lot of people customize their stuff. I don't really feel like a surplus gun in Ukraine or Russia would have those kinds of attachments to them, because that's adding to the cost, and a lot of these guns have been around since Soviet times when everything was made as cheap as possible. So with that in mind, I do know what you're talking about, but I don't think they have large numbers of those. anywhere around Ukraine or Russia. So with that, I hope I addressed that question pretty well, and I thank you very much for the support. Once again, I may be wrong. I do have to make that disclaimer, so take it with a grain of salt, but that's what I'm thinking about that situation right now. And so with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from William Allen again, who says, Spam, savory pleasure at mealtime. Whoop.
Well, thank you very much for the support, William. And also, yeah, I could agree with that abbreviation right there. That's a pretty good one. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support once again, and whoop. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Martin Nielsen, who says, do you think Putin's stupid attack on Ukraine will be used in the commercials? For example, you're not you when you're hungry. Eat AF Snickers.
Oh, no. I think maybe, you know, it would be kind of weird to see that, but I still think that would be kind of a little bit of a funny commercial. So with that, thank you very much for the support and also the crazy idea right there, honestly. Like, thinking about that in all seriousness, that would be wild to see on TV. That would be kind of like the Nannerpuss commercial and also the Eat Like Snake commercial from Burger King that came out a long time ago. They were just very surreal and really weird. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the question. And with that being said, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Kevin Scott 76, who says, Mr. Lunchtime loses his lunchbox. Mr. Lunchtime accidentally eats his brother. Mr. Lunchtime realizes he's been eating for the wrong side. He is so sad.
Well, thank you very much for the support and also the cool little story. But yeah, I mean, like maybe Mr. Lunchtime's hunger is like King Midas's touch. And now he's regretting the curse that's been put on him. I don't know. But that was still a pretty interesting little story. You made a whole entire backstory for Mr. Lunchtime, which is kind of funny. And also really wild in a way that he's become such a character on this channel that people are making backstories for him. Still, really cool to me. And I do thank you so much for the support. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from C8 Lags, who says, this is for the spam fund. Look up spam Masubi and make one.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and let's follow through on that and pull up Spam Masubi. Matthew, look at this. This is the future of food. This is what we're going to be eating at a sushi shop here in the future, is Spam Masubi. It's got a seaweed wrap around it with rice and fried spam. That actually looks like it may be good. I'll have to try that. I'll definitely have to try and make one. And so with that in mind, I thank you so much for the support and also the idea as to what we could get to use with spam. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Daniel Armener, who says, Top Gun was incredible. Highly recommend for anyone who loves to fly or planes in general.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. And also, I think that I've heard a lot of good things about Top Gun, and I would have to agree that I will have to try and go out there and take a look at it because it does sound really good. Also, they have the F-18 in it, which is a pretty nice plane. You know, it's not a bad one at all. It's just that it replaced the F-14, which had a lot of fans, obviously because of the Top Gun movie for the most part. And also, I believe the Final Countdown, which was about an aircraft carrier that went back in time and ended up fighting the Japanese at Pearl Harbor, which was a really weird story. But anyways, I thank you so much for the support, and also I've heard a lot of good things about it as well. And so I think that's pretty true, and I'd highly recommend people go and check it out. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from El Fuego, who says, just wanted to spam your channel. Keep up the great content.
Well, and thank you very much for the support and also the little joke. I think spam is wonderful, not just because it's a decent sausage in a can, but also because it is kind of like the epitome of American industrialization. Who would have ever thought that one day you could walk into a store and literally get a block of meat to eat? That's really weird and kind of cool. And I think it's like the epitome of American industrialism in a way. So with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the question or the comment in a way. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And moving on, we have a $5 donation from The Beezer, who says, I still experience horrible panic attacks, but for some reason, this show calms me. I think it calms me because it's sincere and detailed. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you very much for the support and also the kind words. It's great to know that we can help your panic attacks a pretty good deal. I don't know why, but I always try and make sure that, you know, I try and deliver this the best I can and make sure that the news is light and not too heavy, although there is, of course, heavy stuff that comes with war. But I do thank you very much for the kind words, and I'm glad that we can help you out with making sure that you don't get as many panic attacks as you used to. I hope that my words and advice kind of helped out a little bit. Of course, if you do have panic attacks, of course, saying something is much easier than doing it in every aspect, and I'm sure it's very difficult to try and overcome panic attacks. But I'm glad to hear that this helps out in a way, and so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that you continue to enjoy these streams well into the future. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $4 donation from Frankie S. TYO, who says, thanks from Japan. For balance, last week there were 4 to 5 videos of sizable Ukrainian units in custody after refusing to fight. See History Legends.
Interesting. I'll have to try and take a look at that. Let's pull up History Legends. Let's take a look at this. Legends of History? I don't think they're covering that. Maybe these History Legends. Here we go. Let me look at this guy real quick, because if you notice all of his titles, they're all leaning, of course, in the Russian slant instead of the Ukrainian slant. Russians plan to trap the Ukrainian army. Ukraine on the offensive. Okay, well, he said that one pretty fair. Wow, this guy doesn't upload at all. Like I do this daily. This guy is doing this like every other week or so. Let's see. Breakthrough. Trench warfare is back. Why is the Russian war cry raw? Something doesn't add up about Russian losses. And now he's like, you know, trying to say, huh, you know, the amount of Russian losses doesn't make sense. Accident. Look, see, he's even trying to go with on the thumbnail, the whole entire thing that the Moskva was sunk by the Russians on accident instead of being hit by the Ukrainians. I don't know. I mean, like, looking at this guy's stuff at a glance, I would have to kind of... Well, no, I mean, like, some of it's fair, though, because he said they abandoned Siege of Kyiv. But I haven't really watched the videos a lot, but from the thumbnails, this is looking like a little sketch to me. So I hope that answers the question. Of course, I'm not going to pass judgment. I may be entirely wrong. I'll have to go and try and check out his channel and take a good look at it. But, you know, with that, I will try and see about it. But then again, it does look like some of his videos do have, like, Russian-leaning tendencies in them, and so he may be reporting stuff that the Russians fabricated. I don't know, but I'll take a look into it. So with that, I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment in a way. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And Enforcer, we do have 4 more super chats left and quite a few live chat questions, and we are running quite a bit late. So up next, we have a $10 donation from Hoodoo, Texas, who says, Enforcer, I recently took photos of a realistic World War I reenactor in World War I planes, motorcycles, and tank at our museum. See Old Kingsbury Aerodome on Facebook, also on my personal page. It's great fun.
1 second, I want to check that out because I've heard of this place before, and we were talking about this when my group was out reenacting a while ago. So let me try and Pioneer Flight Museum. Oh, cool, it's an ultralight. Anyways, let me try and find this really quick. I am a little pressed for time, but I do want to see this. Oh, whoa. That's my YouTube account. All right, well, I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the question in a way. And I will try and check that out off stream, but sadly, I don't want my account to be seen for too long on stream. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the question in a way, Hooter. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $4 donation from Jonathan Toe, who says, Enforcer, could you comment on spam being part of Allied aid to the USSR during World War II?
Unfortunately, I really can't because I don't know a lot about that aspect of spam. I would have to look into that history a little bit more, and I don't want to just talk BS just to answer the question because I don't really know a lot about it. So with that, I thank you very much for the support, but sadly I wouldn't be able to talk about that today because I don't know about the history of spam in the Soviet Union. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. Sorry I couldn't answer that, but I will try in the future. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $2 donation from CA Lags, who says, did you hear U.S. intel confirms Putin actually has cancer?
I did hear that, and that's something that we have been able to confirm, but I'm not really sure as to what kind of cancer. I've heard several different kinds, but we do know that he has cancer and he may be deathly ill at this point, or maybe even terminal. And so with that, looks like we got another one, Matthew. We got a runner. But anyways, Matthew is going to take care of that in the live chat real quick. And with that, we thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the question in a way. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And for our last super chat of the night, it goes to Kaltenberg, who puts in a $2 donation and says, for more salt.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I will make sure to try and get some more salt. Of course, the Russians are nothing but a salt factory at this point. They can't believe what's going on in Ukraine, and so there's plenty of salt to be had from the Russians absolutely free. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment in a way. And with that, that was our final super chat of the night. We're now going to be putting a cutoff on them. Of course, we won't be able to answer any more super chats beyond this point. So if you would like to support this channel with a super chat, make sure to come back tomorrow and put one in first thing tomorrow. Or go buy some merch if you would just like to support the channel. You get something pretty neat out of it, and also it lets people know you're a huge fan of the Enforcer channel. And with that being said, we are now going to move on to 3 live chat questions, and then we're going to wrap up tonight's stream. And so with that, what is our first question? Oh, there's another one. Let me get rid of that one.
Oh, I don't know how they're getting in here because the subscriber chat only is on. So apparently they're subscribing and staying in here for like more than 5 minutes just to say that.
Interesting. So with that, we're on to the questions.
So up first, we have one from Turn Off Your Gaslight, who says, the other night I asked about possibility of having POW interviewer Vladimir Zolkin as a guest. Any chance on that?
That may be a little bit difficult for me to do because there's no way for me to reach out to him, but I may be able to see about Starsky reaching out to him and bringing him on here. At the same time, I'm not really sure, but we will try and look into that and see if that is a possibility. So with that, I thank you so much for being a longtime viewer. Turn off your gaslight. You've been around for a long time, and I hope that does address the question in a way. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Bobo Uzala, who says, is the U.S. sending a drone similar to the Bayraktar?
The U.S. is sending a drone, yeah, it's similar to Bayraktar. It can carry about the same amount of weapons. It does pretty much the same thing. It's just that it's a different design. And maybe a little bit better, but I'm not really sure. I don't really know a lot of details about the systems that are in the Bayraktar compared to the Predator. I mean, like, maybe the Bayraktar is better than the Predator, but I don't really know that for sure. So I hope that kind of answers the question in a way. I don't really have concrete answers about which one's better, if either of them are, but they do appear on the surface to be very similar in function, purpose, and how they're used. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, at least in brief. And with that, we're going to answer one last question. I'm actually getting a headache on the right side of my head right now, which is this is a great time to end the stream. But we're going to answer one last question, and then we're going to round out the stream for tonight. And so with that, who is the lucky last person who got in that lucky last question?
So the last question of the night goes to Chris, who says, Enforcer, are NATO countries like Poland sending food supplies for their Ukrainian troops?
I'm not really sure. Actually, I think that a lot of them are sending economic and military aid, but I haven't really heard about a lot of foodstuffs being sent there. I would assume at some point that foodstuffs would be sent. I'm not really sure how much, and I think they would be kind of taking the supporting role to the food supplies that are already within Ukraine, and kind of just making sure that if there's an influx of people and a shortage of supply in a specific area, that supply could be met in kind of like a stopgap situation. So with that, I hope that kind of answers the question, at least in a way, and don't take that, and don't quote me on it, because I don't really know a lot about the food situation with Poland. I'm just kind of making some assumptions as to how it would most likely work. So with that, I hope that answers the question to the best of my abilities. I will try and see about getting a little bit more information on that if I can. And with that, that is the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much for watching. Of course, it's been a pleasure and an honor to report day 99 of the news of the war in Ukraine. And tomorrow will be day 100, the first time that this war will be entering the 3-digit area in terms of days of how long this war has lasted. Once again, Ukraine has made it through another day, and of course, it has always been a pleasure of mine and a great honor of mine to be able to report the news to the Lee Spring Army. It's always I'm always so proud of this stream and this channel and how far we've all come and how much support we've raised and everything we've done in the meantime, all the jokes we've had, all the sad times we've had. It's been impressive. It's incredible to me, and I think it's absolutely wonderful. And so with that, I thank you all so much. I'm actually going to answer William Allen's super chat real quick so that way it doesn't go unanswered. William Allen sent in $10 and said Spam was a staple for the home front as well, and it definitely was. In World War II, Spam became a pretty common food for everyone, the soldiers and the civilians. Also, it was pretty cheap back then. It was kind of like a Great Depression era food, and that's what also led to it being incredibly popular. And so with that, I thank you all once again, and I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for the Day 100 news. 100 days of war, 100 days of Ukraine's defense, and hopefully another 100 days of Ukraine giving it to the Russians and the Russians failing to achieve their objectives in this war. I thank you all once again, and I hope you all have a great night. Slava Ukraini, Героям слава.